Hey everyone, my name is Jake, and welcome to the 16th episode of Good Timin. As always on this podcast, we're going to be talking all about one of our favorite bands, the Beach Boys. And today we're going to be covering an album that often gets slagged off by both fans and music critics. But this is an album that I personally think has quite a bit of charm to it, and it's honestly grown on me quite a bit over the years. So, of course, the album I'm talking about is the Beach Boys' 1976 release, 15 Big Ones. And as we've done on our previous album episodes, we're going to be discussing the album's history and background. So we're going to do a track-by-track rundown of the album and share our thoughts and opinions on each of the songs. And we're also going to get into some of the outtakes and extra material recorded around the time, as well as some critic reviews of the album, which should be interesting. So joining me today, I have Riley, Matt, and our returning guest, Nate, who previously joined us for our Al Jardine episode a few weeks ago. So as always, I'm glad to have you guys here, and I'm looking forward to discussing this somewhat divisive album with you all. So before we get into some of the album's history and background, do you guys kind of want to briefly share your general thoughts and opinions on 15 Big Ones?
I would just say for me, it's a mixed bag. Some of it I like, some of it I think is really lame and not very good. But when it is good, it is very charming.
Um, I'm kind of the same way. I think it's a mixed bag. I do think the album as a whole is pretty charming, but I don't really come back to it too much. There are certain tracks I'll come back to. I like a couple of them, and I'm not going to mention them yet because I feel like that's more of a thing I should mention when we go over the tracks. But it's definitely charming. But at the same time, it's kind of disappointing. This was the album that brought Brian back as producer and kind of as the lead creative in the band. But I like it more for what it represented and kind of what came after than the actual album itself. But there are a couple of tracks on here that I revisit quite a lot, so it's all right.
I think it's a misunderstood album and era, and we'll get into that. But I personally love it for its warts and all, and I listened to it probably every day for the last 4 years. So it hits the spot for me, and so I think it's kind of a triumphant work in my opinion. Like despite accusations of backward stepping, I think it's solidified their place in American popular music. It wasn't questionable at that point. Like they were here to stay once they returned to the charts with 15 Big Ones. So I think it was definitely in a unique way a triumph for them.
Yeah, my general take on the album. So, like, as I mentioned, this album has really grown on me over the years. I can remember initially, like, the first time I heard it, there was not a lot on here I really liked at all. It might have been literally one or two songs, but like over time, it's just really grown on me. I can definitely like get some charm from it for sure. I think actually, I honestly personally do enjoy a lot of the covers. I know that those are some of the songs that people slag off the most on this album, but I personally do like quite a few of them. I think they're really good. And like it's cool that like this is the album where Brian kind of makes his return again. Obviously, we're gonna get into a little bit of history here in terms of like was he really truly back? That's kind of up for debate. But the fact that he was back in the studio, kind of helping to lead the way with the band, I think it's kind of a cool thing. And there's some songs on here I come back to a lot. Honestly, I can totally see why people slag off this album for sure. That it's definitely an acquired taste, I would say, but. As I've said before on this podcast, I love you, and I love like the synths on there, and you kind of hear a bit of that on this album as well. So I think that definitely plays a role in my enjoyment of it as well. So, all right. So before we get into our 15 Big Ones discussion, I thought it would be good to share some basic facts and info about the album, in case any of our listeners aren't super familiar with it or just need a refresher. So the album was released on July 5th, 1976 on Brother Reprise Records, and it was the Beach Boys' 20th studio album and their first in over 3 years. After Holland. So most of the album was recorded between January and May of 1976 at Brother Studios in Santa Monica. And what's really notable about the recording of this album is that Brian Wilson was back in his role as producer for the first time in many years. So prior to this album, the last time Brian was solely credited as producer was on Pet Sounds in 1966. So the band really leaned into marketing 15 Big Ones as Brian's official return to the group as leader. Of course, we all know about like the Brian's Back, the big marketing campaign that was going on around this time where you had Brian making a lot of TV appearances, appearing on like talk shows and doing live performances. So they were really kind of pushing the whole, Brian is back in the band thing, because obviously, Brian Wilson was at that time and today is a very respected name, a very respected artist. So having his name on the album and in the public definitely helped the band. But again, with the reality in terms of the Brian's back movement, the reality was that while the band wanted the public to think that Brian was totally back and taking leadership of the group again, in reality, he really wasn't. If you watch TV interviews and appearances from around that time with Brian, you can tell that he wasn't totally well. Physically, he was pretty overweight around this time, and the years of drinking and drug abuse had clearly taken a toll on his voice. He also apparently had laryngitis during the recording of 15 Big Ones, and you can definitely hear that on many of the tracks. His vocals are definitely pretty rough throughout the album. Brian also seemed pretty uncomfortable and nervous on stage. Like if you watch like videos from like live shows around this time and you read like reviews of concerts. And this is something that both fans and critics noticed. There's a quote from Steve Love, who was the band's manager at the time. And he said that maybe it would have been more accurate to say, we think and hope Brian's on his way back. But that's not going to cut it for a professional media campaign. So I think that kind of shows that even the band kind of knew at the time that Brian wasn't totally well. But they also knew that having him back involved would help them sell albums and sell tickets. So they essentially kind of pushed him back into the spotlight. So in terms of this album's sound and style, it's definitely a lot different from anything the band had released up to that point. The album is very synth heavy. In particular, the Moog synthesizer can be heard prominently throughout the record, which the band would use even more on their following album, which is Love You. And many of the songs also sound kind of rushed or unfinished, and that's because they kind of were. By this time, Brian was no longer like a studio like perfectionist like he used to be. And during the recording of this album, he would often rush through sessions and be content after recording just a few takes. And this would kind of cause a lot of tension within the band because the other members didn't really agree with the way that Brian was doing things. I know that there's a quote from Al where he basically said that he felt that Brian was not competent enough to single-handedly finish the album. And there's also some stories of Carl and Dennis and Mike getting pretty frustrated during the recording process of this album as well. But despite all the drama and controversy surrounding the recording of 15 Big Ones, it actually sold very well, especially in the US, where it peaked at number 8 on the charts. The band also had their first top 10 single in years with their cover of Rock and Roll Music. And that went to number 5 in the US, as well as a top 30 single with It's Okay. So despite the fact that a lot of critics really kind of ragged on this album at the time, it didn't really seem to hurt its sales much. And I think a big reason for that is that the Beach Boys were experiencing a huge resurgence around this time. Their popularity in the US was honestly as high as it had ever been. Of course, Endless Summer had gone to number 1 only a couple of years prior in 1974. And then you also had the band's old 60s hits being featured in a lot of shows and movies like American Graffiti. So to me personally, I've always kind of viewed this album as kind of a turning point for the band in that it kind of showed where they moved away from the more like progressive sound that they had on albums like Surf's Up in Holland and started to lean more into being more of a nostalgia act, kind of reflecting back on like the 60s and bringing people, good nostalgic memories back. So despite all this, though, I still think that there's some great material that came from this period, in particular from Love You. But even 15 Big Ones has some really fun and enjoyable tracks, and I can't wait to get into discussing them with you guys. So, Nate, I know you're a really big fan of this album, probably much bigger than many of our listeners. So do you kind of want to share like what it is about 15 Big Ones that makes you love it so much? And then you can maybe get into some more about the album's history and background.
Sure. Yeah, so first, I just wanted to say that was like such an astute like retelling of the way the album went down. Like, well done, my friend.
Thank you.
But yeah, so I would say what was my turning point to start enjoying the album was deeply falling in love with Love You. And, like both Love You and 15 Big Ones are acquired tastes, like Jake said. And, it's like with Love You, you're jarred at first and then you fall in love with the songwriting and the arrangements and the textures. And so I fell in love with Love You, and as I'm going through the catalog, it dawned on me like, wow, like 15 Big Ones is really like a Love You Part 1, and they're almost like sibling records, so to speak. And so once I just sort of took a step back from viewing each album so individualized and just looked at the Beach Boys' overarching career, I think it gave me a new perspective on like 15 Big Ones and just let me appreciate the music for what it is without getting so caught up in the politics of sort of the scenarios that Jake described. And so specifically what I love about the album is I think Brian Wilson is a master, maybe above all his other talents, is a master of creating textures. And I think in the Beach Boys' earliest days, he, really mastered that surf dripping with reverb, Chuck Berry, Dick Dale rock and roll sound. He mastered that texture. You go into the Today and Pet Sounds years, and he mastered these immaculate textures of keyboards and psychedelic instruments and folk influences. And like throughout the years, you can mark chapters throughout Brian's career based on the textures in the music he was creating. And the textures he was creating on 15 Big Ones, to me, just like I said, to me, they just hit the spot. And I think they're so unique and almost unlike anything I've heard from any other artist, the way it combines. To me, what the standout elements of the album are the drumming, the use of synthesizers, and the saxophone sections, like the woodwind, horns, use of those instruments. I think those are like the hallmarks of the album and sort of like the through line. The album is really jarring with the juxtaposition of the originals and oldies, but the through line to me is the drum sound and the synthesizer sound. And to me, that texture that Brian created is, to me, like no less admirable than the stuff he achieved on Pet Sounds. It's just different. And he always found new ways to combine different instruments and to create new sounds out of like a fairly limited set of instruments. Like nowadays we have infinite amount of synthesizers and samples and AI, but back in 1976, Brian was still combining different kinds of guitars and pianos and horn sections and harmonies and so on and so forth. And so, yeah, I just fell in love with the arrangements on the album.
Yeah, I feel like the arrangements really stand out to me too. Like I think of like looking at the track list songs like Just Once in My Life, In the Still of the Night. Like to me, like the arrangements on those are so good. Like I love the way the synth is incorporated into those songs. It really makes them distinctive. I feel like it makes them unique. And like you said, it sounds nothing like Pet Sounds, but I feel like it has its own appeal in that way. Like this is the band doing something completely different from anything they had done before. And again, I can see I can see why maybe some of these arrangements, some of these performances aren't for everybody. I can see like the vocals can be a challenge for people to get past, obviously like Brian doesn't sound great on this album, as I would say Dennis necessarily doesn't either. But honestly, I do really enjoy a lot of the arrangements. And I think both the originals and the covers sound pretty good, even though I may not care exactly for all the songs musically. So do you want to kind of, Nate, do you kind of want to talk about like how this album kind of like came to be, like the origins of 50 Big Ones?
So following Holland, as we know, the band was sort of at a crossroads, and they had lost their like enamorment with Jack Riley. They were really into him for a few years, and by the mid 70s, the situation with Riley had become quite complicated, and including the fact that Riley, let's say, misled the band about his resume and just lied about working for organizations that like didn't exist. And he did create a division within the band, basically, that, or if maybe he didn't even create it, but he solidified it. He solidified the division between the so-called creative camp and the nostalgia camp. And after the mini win that was Surf's Up as far as chart success, the band was once again struggling commercially with Carl and the Passions and Holland, and they just knew they were at a crossroads. They had to decide if they were going to continue in this progressive vein or find some new way to reinvent themselves. And like Jake described, just by coincidence, in the years of 73, 74, 75, the public sentiment, particularly in America and probably worldwide, was a longing for the old days, for the 50s and 60s, of a longing for simpler times. And the Beach Boys got swept up in that whole movement. And that definitely, I think, told the band enough. At the public at large let them know what direction to proceed in to a large degree with the nostalgia craze of the 70s and with Endless Summer doing so well. So really you can't bring up the 15 Big Ones discussion without getting to 74 and having Endless Summer go number one.
Mhm.
If Endless Summer hadn't gone number one, the band likely would have continued in that progressive vein. But Endless Summer going number one, the writing was on the wall. So, like has been described, Brian did return to the producer's chair. And at first, the band didn't even know exactly what they were creating. Dennis had been quoted at the time as saying were working on up to 3 albums at once. And somewhere close to maybe 40 different songs. And at one point, the idea was to record an all originals album and an oldies album. But with Endless Summer doing so well, and with the band leaving this multi-year gap of having no album release, it was time for them to release an album. So they sort of compromised on the idea of having the original album and the oldies album and sort of combined those ideas into one record. And the results were mixed and flawed, but to me, that's certainly part of the charm. So one more thing I'll add, just historically, before we continue to pass the discussion around, is that Carl was still playing the role of being very supportive to Brian, essentially a co-producer. I think he was with Brian during most of these sessions. And of course, Bruce by this point was no longer in the group, though he was actually playing on a few of the songs still, and he was around. Mike and Al do appear on the album, though a lot of the stuff that Mike was working on would end up going in various different directions since he was working on multiple different projects on this time. So the band was fragmented, but what I love about 15 Big Ones is the contributions of Dennis. And while that night might not be super obvious at first because he doesn't have any writing credits on this album, but he drums on every song on the record with the exception of 3 songs. And to me, it's Dennis rediscovering the drums with like a new passion and vigor for drumming. You can tell by 68, 69, 1970, Dennis was probably feeling claustrophobic in his role as drummer and sort of fancied himself more as a singer-songwriter, and rightfully so. And of course, he hurt his hand. Ricky joins the band. Everyone knows how that goes. But by the time of 15 Big Ones, shortly into the sessions, Ricky leaves the band. And so Dennis resumed his role as drummer, and dude just has so much energy with his drumming on the album. And I think you can tell how excited he is to be back at the kit. And I think his technique is radically different from this point for the rest of his life than his drumming was prior to this record and prior to his hiatus as a drummer.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly have never really thought about that, but yeah, you're right. Yeah, Dennis drums on the majority of this album. And also, like, one of the shining, I mean, we'll get to it during our track discussion, but like one of my favorite moments on this whole album is his vocal on In the Still of the Night. I mean, I absolutely love that. So, yeah, definitely an album where yeah, Dennis shines. And a couple of things I wanted to add to what you mentioned. So one, so you mentioned Carl kind of helping out Brian during this time. So Carl did Carl assist him like with the production itself on this album a little bit? Because I heard that like the guys weren't exactly like satisfied with like like Brian's final production. So I heard like maybe they tinkered with it a little bit after the fact. Is that true? Or
Yeah, I think it's two things are equally true, that Carl was still like the de facto uh final stamp of approval
Mhm.
for everything the band did. I think really for his whole life. Like I don't think they ever like would really do anything too out of step with what Carl wanted. He was like the peacekeeper. So I think his role was partially technical, but it was also just him being a good brother.
Mm-hmm. And then the other thing I wanted to mention, you talked about, like with American Graffiti and like the Endless Summer going to number one, how like there was this shift and like the crowd kind of made it, the public made it apparent. You can like kind of hear it at concerts from around this time because like if you read like reviews from concerts or you listen to like bootleg recordings of concerts, you can hear like when they were doing that newer progressive material, like they would do songs like The Traitor live, or something like Funky Pretty. The crowd would like, they might give an applause, but like it wasn't anything like, they weren't like, it was either a slight applause or like confusion or people didn't really know how to react. But like when they would do the string of hits, like Surfing USA, Fun, 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 I Get Around, I mean, the public would just go nuts, and like I think that kind of showed it too. I know that
you hear stories of the stadiums shaking when they'd play the oldies because people would be jumping and dancing.
Yes, that's crazy. And I know like their manager around this time, like you had like James Guercio come in, and I know he was kind of pushing them as well to like kind of telling them like, hey guys, like listen to how the public reacts to these songs. Like we need to start putting in more of the oldies. Like I know you guys want to keep doing newer stuff, but like listen to what the crowd wants, and make an appease to them. So I feel like I can feel for like Carl and Dennis and the guys that wanted to go in the more progressive direction because obviously like you don't want to just become like a musical, like what's the word, like a musical dinosaur or time warp, but at the same
traveling
time,
museum. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. But it's tough when like the public obviously wants one thing and the band wants another, so I can totally understand why the band went this route. So, all right. Do we want to get into the track by track rundown of this album?
Sure.
All right, let's do it. All right, so let's start out with side one and track one, which is the band's cover of Rock and Roll Music. So Nate, I know I love this song a lot. Personally, I have to admit it's not a favorite of mine on this album. I don't think it's like the worst thing they ever recorded, but I do think it's one of their lesser covers. It doesn't blow me away in the slightest. I think, you think of like the Beatles cover of this song from one of their earlier albums. It has so much energy to it. Beatles for Sale, I think it's from, but so much energy to it, such a rocking vocal. John Lennon just really shouting it. But then, I don't know, you listen to this one, especially if you listen to it back to back with that one, and this one just kind of comes off as sounding a bit limp to me. I'm not a huge fan of Mike's vocal on it. And I will say, I know like the single version of this song was mixed a little differently. I think it's got a little more energy to it, and a little more going on in the mix, and I do like that version more. But to be honest, this isn't a song I come back to much, despite the fact that it was a big hit for the band. So, what are your guys' thoughts on Rock and Roll Music?
I think it's not very good. I think it lacks energy. I think you hit it on the head, Jake, where like I think the Beatles nailed it, and it's like, why would they even cover this? Not to mention, it's like, and I think Pitchfork said this in their review, this is like Mike at his most nasal, which it is. I don't think it's very good. I'm not a fan of it, and I don't think it should have started the album off.
Yeah, right. It's stale. I don't think it's bad. I think it's definitely a cover of the song. I just don't think it really lacks the energy. I mean, the first version of Rock and Roll Music that I ever heard was the Beatles version. So that really like put into place how I wanted that song to sound. And then I hear this one, and it just I don't mind some of the synth work, but this is rock and roll music. I need the electric guitar in it. I actually think that if somebody was to sing it, no matter how they approach the song, it shouldn't have been Mike. I mean, I know we did Surfing USA, and I know he did pretty good on that one, but I mean, if you gave this one to Al or Carl, or I guess even Dennis, it would have been much better than let me hear some of that rock and roll. Like that's not what I want from this song. I do think the single mix is better. And I there is one part of the song, I think, when he says when he gets to that they play it too darn fast part. I mean, I actually think that's probably the best vocal part, but it's still not great. I think the vocals kill it. I mean, the whole approach to it is just not what I want for rock and roll music. I think the Beach Boys could have done a good job with it, but I don't think they did.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, that's an interesting thought. Thinking of like Dennis doing the vocal on this, like with his voice at the time, like rock and roll.
Yeah,
music.
I've never thought about that, but that could be sick because
Yeah. All right, Nate, go ahead, defend this thing.
Okay, so this might be, I'm sure it'll be considered probably like the most nuclear take and probably like the most outlandish thing you three have probably ever heard. But I, for whatever strange reason, for whatever crazy reason in my head, I just I've never heard a better 2.5 minutes or whatever it is on recorded tape in my like
Jesus Christ.
truest like enjoyment and so I mean for various things about it. Like I'll just like say like flat out I'm a huge Mike Love fan. I love his voice. It's fun to me. It doesn't represent someone that's like a virtuoso of a vocalist like Elvis Presley or the Righteous Brothers, but
Mm.
just someone that sounds like an average guy having a good time and having a ball. And like when that is captured, it's just so much fun for me. And I think Mike's vocal, he just knocks it out of the park. I think it's like the classic Mike Love vocal sound. And I do understand why people don't like it. And I'm not even gonna lie, I used to like detest this song and this recording. When I first heard this song and this whole album, I was not a fan. But just like through my love of the Beach Boys, through learning about them, through becoming more passionate about them, it all grew on me. And this is like my favorite song. And it's really funny what you guys said about the Beatles version, because that was my introduction to the song too. And I've heard the
Mm.
Chuck Berry version. And to me, like neither of those versions do much for me. But that's because I'm a big Wall of Sound guy. Like my whole passion, and my whole driving force in my life, in a way, is the Wall of Sound and big arrangements and creative arranging. And so to take rock and roll music, which when the Beatles did it and Chuck Berry did it, was like a 3-4 piece band type of sound, very kind of straightforward early rock and roll. So to repurpose it with about a dozen synthesizers and organs and a horn section and Dennis Wilson speeding up the tempo throughout the entire song. It's like sonic ecstasy to me. And the backing vocals are just like so creative, and it to me it's a great example of Brian Wilson's use of syncopation. Like you can't really play the parts to a click with it sounding right. Brian like syncopates the hell out of the bass line and the backing vocals. And Dennis plays the drums really straight. Most versions of rock and roll music are kind of swung. Um, and even like the Beatles version, they kind of go into like a Latin beat. But with the Beach Boys, it's like a straight four on the floor, just Dennis like keeping the solid beat, and his fills that take the verses into the chorus are my probably my favorite moment of Dennis Wilson drumming.
No, I mean, I want to like it more than I do. Like, I feel like the concept, like describing it, I feel like it has potential. Like, okay, it's like rock and roll music, but we're gonna do it with like kind of like that love you synth sound. We're gonna like do like that kind of that late 70s like Beach Boys sound to it. Like, I feel like on paper, like I feel like it should work for me, but I don't know. I just feel like it's just lacking a bit. Like it's just lacking a bit of energy. I wish the tempo was a little bit higher. Again, I know the single version it does sound maybe a little more energized, but I mean, Nate, that's a compelling case for it. I'm definitely going to give another listen, for sure. Like listening for some of the things you pointed out, like how the tempo kind of picks up throughout the song. And I can see that too, like why like you appreciate this version, like being like a wall of sound guy. You know, there's a lot going on production wise with this song with the arrangement, but yeah, it's just I don't know, man. Maybe if I had heard this version before, like the Beatles version, maybe it would do more for me. You know, I feel like that Beatles version was the introduction for a lot of us to this song. And it's just really hard for me not to compare it to that version whenever I hear it, you know. But
For
I
me, there was a moment it clicked where it magically went from a song that I did not care for at all to like my favorite recording. And this will be a similar story to something I brought up in the last episode I joined you guys. But for
Mhm.
me, it's so hard to separate music like from these moments in your life, you know? Um, so one day I'm in the car with my dad, and my dad is a 70s station junkie. My entire life, anytime I'm in the car with my dad, he always has the 70s station on.
Mhm.
And here comes on the Beach Boys version of rock and roll music. And to this point, I think I had only heard the album version, um, which I even would agree with is a little bit lacking. I think the mix like sucked a lot of the best parts out and emphasized some of the weaker parts of the arrangement. Um, but hearing the 45 version for the first time in the radio was like a revelation because the shitty audio quality almost like enhanced the song and made me hear what I felt like people back then were hearing. And so my dad said like, "Oh yeah, I remember the year this came out, 1976. I was at summer camp and I thought it was the best thing I ever heard. I couldn't believe how good it sounded." So hearing my dad tell that story and paint that picture and me hearing it on the radio in that way sort of made it all click in my head on as to why it was such a big hit and why the public went crazy for it. I'm like, "Oh yeah, I hear why this is so fun. I hear why
Yeah.
people back then would flip at it." Like my dad said he had never heard anything like it, and it's understandable because this was still so early for synthesizer music. So to hear have the Beach Boys song with blasting synths be a top 10 hit, I understand like why he felt that way. And so for
Yeah.
me, that's what made the song click.
I was gonna say you kind of bring up a really good point with Mike Love's vocals. I mean, you said he's kind of an everyman. He's kind of like he's kind of like represents like the people that don't really have a whole lot of musical talent. And I feel like that's kind of the appeal for a lot of them. I mean, I'm a big fan of Oasis and the Stone Roses and their lead singers, Liam Gallagher. I mean,
Yeah.
I think he's a powerful vocalist, but I mean, like he's objectively not a very talented vocalist. So I mean, I really see the appeal. I mean, same with like Ian Brown of the Stone Roses. I'm a big Stone Roses fan, but if you ever heard the Stone Roses play live, that guy is the most out of tune motherfucker you'll ever hear. Um, so
Yeah,
I
it's like
totally
being
get
a
it.
capital S singer versus just a vocalist.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you're right. I mean, he's more of a vocalist than an actual singer. I mean, kind of with that kind of mindset, I gotta be honest, I kind of opened my eyes with a lot of the Mike Love vocals. So I'm definitely makes a lot of sense. Maybe not for this song in particular, because I still think he's like, let me hear some. I still hear a lot of that, but I mean, with a lot of his other stuff, and we'll get to it in the album. I kind of definitely an appreciation for it.
Love to hear it.
All right, let's move on to track 2 on the album, and this was also a single for the band, and this was "It's Okay." So as you mentioned, Nate, this one has Ricky Pitar on drums, which is interesting.
Yep.
Fun about the song, but this is one I can remember initially not caring for. This is one of the ones like I knew it was a single, but like listening to it didn't really do anything for me. And over time, I really started to connect with it, and I really enjoy it now. I think Mike's vocal on it is really good. Definitely an improvement over his vocal on rock and roll music, in my opinion. I think he sounds a lot better on this one. And this song is kind of like, I feel like it's kind of like in the vein of like a song like Do It Again. It's just like kind of a fun summer song, just very like carefree, fun lyrics. I love Dennis's part at the end, the find a ride, find a ride.
So
Like that's
good.
easily part of the song. And I really like the song. I can see like why it's not everyone's thing. I can remember my dad a couple months back, he sent me a picture whenever like Beach Boy stuff comes on. He's always like texts me, and he had a picture of like his little car dashboard on the radio, and it was "It's Okay," and he said, "I don't really care for this one," and I was like, "Yeah, I used to not care for it either, Dad, but I actually kind of like it now." So for me, this is one of the stronger songs on the album. Definitely one of the strongest originals. What do you guys think of it?
Yeah, I like it a lot. I think it actually should have been the first single, instead of Rock and Roll Music. I think it would have been better. Especially because I think this came out in, like towards the end of summer. Yeah, it did. So like I don't think it had the potential to be as big of a hit as it could have. I kind of like that like back to the sun and fun vibe. I actually like this better than Do It Again, but I will admit I've never been a huge fan of that song. I know a lot of people like it. It's never done much for me. But yeah, I really enjoy this song. I like Dennis's kind of more gruff vocals on it. Mike's vocal on this is a lot better, I think. And yeah, I really enjoy the song a lot.
Yeah, this really is Do It Again to Electric Boogaloo, but I really
Yeah.
like it. I like this one from the get-go when I first heard it. This is like one of the tracks from the album I really appreciated. I feel like compared to rock and roll music, this one does have the energy that was lacking before. Um, I mean, I don't think it's anything like crazy musically. Like there's nothing. Maybe the synth work is pretty ahead of its time, but like musically, there's nothing like complex going on. Um, but it's so much fun. I can really see why Brian still really likes this one. I remember watching that Long Promised Road documentary, and after he heard like the sad news about Jack Riley, he's like, "Play Do It Again from 15 Big Ones," and I really see the appeal in it. It's a lot of fun. Yeah, it's pretty cool that Ricky's on this one. And I do really like Dennis's raspy vocal debut on this. He's like, it's awesome. I mean, I don't really come back to this one too much, but it is on my Beach Boys playlist, and if it shows up, I'm probably not going to skip it. So,
Well, yeah, I'm so glad that you mentioned like Brian's relationship with the song because uh the COVID quarantine kind of era was really when I discovered like this album, discovered an appreciation for this album. And It's Okay was kind of like my medicine for quarantine blues, so to speak. And so like that song really like got me through. And so like that moment in the movie where you can tell Brian was sad and like asked for It's Okay to be played, it even like made me choked up because I just like related so much to that song being like an escape. And I do agree with what you said, Riley, that there's nothing too complex here. And to me, what makes the song work is like the beauty in the simplicity. Um, like there's a reason that triads in the basic rock and roll progression work and sound good. And to me, I'd say the highlight, aside from a great melody and just it being a catchy song, I love the background harmonies. Like to me, the you really hear Al's voice in that stack. Um, and yeah, it's just so much fun. I yeah, it's a A plus, 10 out of 10 for me. Because I just
Yeah, I
love the
think
Beach Boys rock and roll songs. Like as much as
yeah.
I can also appreciate the Caroline Knows and the Wonderfuls, like when the Beach Boys are just doing their thing, playing the basic rock and roll about summer and American life, it's like just hits the spot for me. It's like feels so good.
Yeah, Nate, didn't you say you have like a thing for like they're kind of like mid-tempo rockers? I think you said like you really connected with
Yeah,
the yeah.
yeah, and to me this is the album where that uh sound really like comes into its own. Like you got little
Mhm.
peaks of it with Do It Again and Marcella, but to me like this is the album where you get that like really interesting Beach Boys like mid-tempo, relaxed kind of rock and roll. It's and forgive me if I'm always going to be searching for words with this particular album review because I'm still to this day trying to figure out what it is about this silly album that resonates with me so much. And It's
Yeah.
Okay is like a great like pinpoint of that. Like it's a silly song and the words are frankly kind of even confusing to me. I'm not sure what half the lines mean, but it's a good time. It's like a party on tape.
All right, we'll move on to the third track on the album, and this is another one that I personally like a lot, and it's "Had to Phone Ya." So this is a song that was originally actually recorded. I believe it was written like in the early '70s, I want to say, and I know it was recorded by American Spring, which was Brian's the group of Brian's wife and her sister, Marilyn and Diane. But the Beach Boys do their version of it here, and I really like it a lot. I think it's a fun song. Definitely one of the strongest originals in my opinion. This is one of the ones where Brian kind of really makes his vocal introduction, and I can imagine people listening to the album at the time are probably like, "Oh boy," like they probably didn't even recognize his voice. When he comes in with the "Sometimes you're busy for a while," like it's just a very rough vocal. But I think there's something charming about it, and I like the little thing at the end, like as the song ends, you hear Marilyn say, "Hey Brian," like almost like on the phone, like with the song title "Had to Phone You." So I think that's kind of fun. But yeah, I really like the song a lot. It's one of the first ones that clicked with me on the album. So, what do you guys think? I had to phone you.
Yeah, I really like it too. I like that everybody gets like a little part on the song. It's got a really nice melody. I really like the backing track too, with like the horns and stuff. I really like the song a lot. One of my favorites on the album.
I think this might be one of the better produced songs on the album. I really like the production on it. You mentioned the horns, Matt. You know that meme where it's like, "Yeah, we're gonna write a really good song and only make it a minute and a half." That's kind of how I feel
Yeah.
about this one. I feel it's like it's too short. I really like the opening verses, and I really like the little second part of the song where everybody kind of shares the vocal. But I mean, it's too damn short, and I feel like this could have been my favorite off the album, but it's like a minute and 40 seconds. I mean, you never really go back to those verses. That Maryland part's really cool, though. I actually just noticed that today. I don't know how I've never heard it. I think it's because I have like pretty terrible hearing, but uh, But yeah, it's a really fun song. I just wish it was longer. Otherwise, it probably would be my favorite from the album, but instead it's another one.
So, when I said that this album is misunderstood, this song in particular was one of the songs that I had in mind for saying that. Um, because I think the notion that the Beach Boys gave up on being artistic just because they started to write lyrics about summer and fun again is is incorrect. Like I think there's just as much artistic merit in lighthearted songs as serious songs. And I think even you could say like this is an example of the Beach Boys still making like creatively progressive music, not in like a quote unquote prog way that like Holland could be considered, but like making unique, creative, one of a kind, forward thinking music. Because you could the chords, it's major nine chords and the song pretty much uses every note available in of the 12 notes that we use. It changes keys all over the place, and musically, it's very sophisticated and creative. And I feel like you could take that backing track and put it with the Smile material, put it with the Pet Sound stuff, and it all lines up as being like from the same creator.
Yeah, I think I watched or I listened to like a piano cover of this song, and it definitely made me appreciate like the chord changes and stuff more. Like it made me realize like yeah, this is more complex than I originally thought. Because like he comes off like on first listen as like kind of like a lighthearted little like pop song, but then re-listening to it or listening to this piano version, it really kind of blew me away. And yeah, I forgot to mention the horns as well. I do really like the backing track with the horns, the arrangement of that. And yeah, I can see to me this album honestly with It's Okay and Headophonia, that's a pretty strong start to the album. And I know some people like rock and roll music too. So honestly, I think this album kind of starts off pretty strong. So all right, we'll move on to track 4. And this is one of the first covers is the second cover on the album. This is Chapel of Love.
Oh,
So I
baby.
know a lot of people. This is one of the lesser tracks on the album to them. Nate, you'll be happy to hear. I actually really like this one a lot. There's something just really charming to me about Brian's vocal, even though I know if we're like being like objective with it, like it's a rough vocal for sure. Like it's
Yeah.
definitely rough, but there's just something about like he just sounds like he's having such a fun time singing it. Like go into the chapel and we're gonna get married. I feel like he's really into it, and you can tell like he really enjoys the song that they're covering. He's having a fun time in the studio. And I don't know, this is one of those ones where like I've seen jokes about like how like Beach Boys fans will listen to something that like maybe like people view as like objectively bad, but be like, this is the greatest thing ever. And like for me, like this song, like it just really does it for me. I don't know, but what do you guys think of Chapel of Love?
Uh, I think it's all right. I think the vocal is really rough, and it's okay. It's never been one of my favorites. It's all right for me.
Yeah, the vocal kind of hurts it a bit. Um, it's okay. It's nothing crazy. I think there are some good covers on here. I don't think there's any bad covers on here. I kind of want to get that out of the way. I just feel like at worst they're just a cover. Um,
Hmm.
and at best I almost prefer them to the original, but for here, it's all right. I won't skip it. Um, but it's nothing crazy for me.
Yeah, I agree.
I actually do. I've heard the original. I actually do prefer this to the original just because like there's something just so wacky about this version. Like just like I don't
So
know.
when you say the original, do you mean the Dixie Cups or the Ronettes?
The
Or
Dixie Cups, Dixie
okay,
Cups.
okay.
I think I've heard the Ronettes version. I do like theirs a lot. But to the Dixie Cups version, I do prefer the Beach Boys version. But I know that that's probably an objectively horrible take. But hey, what do you think of this one?
So, call me crazy, but I've sort of
Crazy.
have this theory that 15 Big Ones is at least in part kind of like a Phil Spector tribute album. And like Brian has always spoken at length about how Pet Sounds was like his mission was to recreate, to reinterpret, if to use the right word, Phil Spector's art form basically with the Wall of Sound. And I think the argument could be made that 15 Big Ones is an even more direct Phil Spector tribute than Pet Sounds was, because it covers so many Spector songs. So Chapel of Love being the first up on the album, that is the first Spector cover, and there's two more. There's Talk to Me, which Spector originally produced, and Just Once in My Life. So Phil was clearly on Brian's mind per usual. And yeah, I agree that the vocals like shockingly rough, but yeah, for me it's hard to ruin a Phil Spector song. Like uh it's just like one of those classic songs. So no matter who's singing it, it's a charming song. And Brian always finds a way to work in interesting aspects of the arranging. But it's probably, in at least in this Beach Boys version, not like one of my favorites, but it doesn't make the album any worse to me.
Yeah. No, I have to say, yeah, I know it's probably not the most like complex arrangement by any means, but like I do like the arrangement of it. Like I like the synths on this and the like the bell and stuff.
Yeah,
Like talking about like if somebody else had sang it, like if like let's say like Carl had done it, I actually don't think I would listen to this as much, just because I think, like I said, I almost think like the fact that the vocal does sound like that almost is what gives it its charm for me. Like I can just like, I don't know, it's just something about Brian doing this that does it for me.
yeah.
It was interesting to hear like Dennis do this one too, like with his voice at the time. So
Yeah,
um,
I gotta be honest. I kind of agree with that like Spectre tribute thing. I kind of feel like that
Mhm.
shows up more on Love You though than this one. At least kind of melodically on Love You, it shows up a bit more,
right.
Cool.
Well,
I love
covers
that
show
perspective. I
up.
love that. Yeah.
especially on those like side two like slower ones. Like I'll bet he's nice,
Mhm.
Airplane. The melodies on those are super Spectre.
And then on Mona, he literally mentioned,
Oh.
he's like, I know you're
You know
gonna
you're
love
gonna love to.
Real
Yeah.
Spectre.
it. All right, so we'll move on to track 4 on the album, which is Everyone's in Love with You. And this is a Mike Love composition. It's also sung by Mike. I've mentioned before, I have a very high tolerance for like very cheesy, kind of sappy sounding songs. Like obviously I mentioned like a lot of people would say Disney Girls is kind of cheesy, sappy song, but like, I absolutely love that song. It's like a top 10 Beach Boys song for me. This
Absolutely.
only goes to the limit of my tolerance though. I think the nicest moment of it is the opening, like with like those really like pretty backing vocals, like when the arrangement first starts. I do like that. From the point Mike comes in, and there's nothing wrong with his vocal, but from that point on, it just doesn't really do that much for me. It's just a little too overly sappy for me. And again, there's a lot of songs that are similar to this that I feel like I do like, both like in the band's discography and like from like other artists from around this time period, like this late 70s period where you had a lot of like popular soft rock stuff, yacht rock stuff on the radio. But this one doesn't do too much for me, but it's definitely not bad, I don't think. But what do you guys think of Everyone's in Love with You?
It's syrupy. It's pretty syrupy.
Europe, yeah.
It has some nice, like, I don't know, it's like it does have some nice vocals, like you said in the beginning, and I like parts of the arrangement, but then it just gets drowned in those strings. And then I found out it's about the Maharishi, and that like made it even worse. So it's like whatever to me. It's just very syrupy.
Um, it's definitely Mike Love doing his best Bruce Johnston impression. But
Wow,
I gotta be
that's a good
honest,
point.
I've kind of I've kind of always thought it was decent, but in the past couple of months, this one's been really growing on me. Um,
Wow.
I think it actually might be one of my favorites off the album. Uh, I think what it needs though is it needs that Holland Big Sur treatment where it gets super stripped back production, and I
Hmm.
think it'd be
Yeah.
incredible song. I
Yeah.
actually think for the only time ever, this is where Mike's lyrics aren't as good as his melody. He only has like a handful of songs, but I think the melody is really beautiful. It's pretty simplistic because I mean Mike doesn't really know a whole lot of like chords, but I think it's a very charming song. I think the production kind of holds it back a bit. It really needs to kind of have that stripped back feeling to it, but it's might be the second favorite on the album for me. It's been really growing on me. I really love this one.
Interesting.
I really have to agree with you about the melody just being like extremely gorgeous. And yeah, I think like the song succeeds because of the melody and almost kind of despite the lyrics and arrangement. Uh, to me, this is kind of like a sneak peek of Looking Back with Love, and it definitely is like such a jarring transition, and it really feels like a Mike Love solo track on a Brian Wilson album, basically because it was. And I think Mike crafted the song with Paul Fort. I'm always screw up on the pronunciation of his name. Paul Farso, yeah, Paul, who is his co-writer for First Love and Unleash the Love, and so
Last Love.
um, so yeah, so it was sort of, I think Brian was like brought in towards the tail end of the song's production to put his little sprinkle of magic on it, but yeah, the arrangement is like a little confused, but it is a really beautiful song to me, and um it sort of has a very similar chord progression to Surfer Girl and Good Timin. So to me, like I sort of associate it with those songs a little bit. And yeah, it's a pretty song. I think it's one of his uh better achievements as a solo songwriter.
Yeah, I kind of forgot to mention that. I think this and Big Sur kind of showed that Mike could have really progressed as a songwriter. He didn't, but he could have. So I really think that's possible. I also wanted to kind of shout out, I really think his vocal on this is very, very beautiful. A very charming vocal on it too. I think that when he doesn't try so hard to go, fun is in, you like that super nasally where he goes with that softer vocal tone. I think it really makes the song pop. Like this Big Sur, All I Want to Do, all like a lot of those like softer songs work a lot better for his vocal. And kind of like we mentioned before, he kind of has that everyman vocal that kind of makes the song a bit more charming and less like pretentious, I guess. But it's
You
also
almost
about the
sort of
Maharishi, so I guess it still is a little pretentious, but I
Mm-hmm.
still really enjoy it.
you almost sort of hear, if you like isolate the songs that Mike like wrote alone and sang on those like early 70s Beach Boys albums, they're kind of almost like a proto Jimmy Buffett sort of thing. Like you said, like an every man sort of gentle singing with the largely acoustic instrumentation. Um, it's definitely a mystery like why Mike didn't pursue that direction more when that was definitely like the Mike sound of the early to mid 70s.
Wasted away again in Margaritaville.
No, honestly, like thinking of what you said, Riley, it would be really interesting to like. I do now because I do think the melody is good on this. I would really like to hear just like an acoustic version of this song, like just guitar, maybe a guitar or two guitars, and that's it. Like just completely strip back the arrangement. That would be really interesting to hear because I feel like I would like this a lot more, honestly, like that.
So to your fortune, there is a version pretty much like that.
Oh,
Mike re-recorded the song actually, and so it was bootlegged for many years on an album called Mike Love Not War, which he actually semi-officially released this past year. If you buy their concert tickets, you get a copy of the album, and it's found its way onto YouTube now. And there's a
yeah.
re-recording of Everyone's in Love with You with like a much more simple, straightforward arrangement. And so it
Wow.
sort of is like the best of both worlds version because you still get the pretty melody, but a more tasteful arrangement.
Wow. Well, I didn't think I was going to be listening to any songs from Mike Love Not War, but after hearing that, I'm going to have to check this out. So as soon as we're done, I'm giving that a listen. So, all right, moving on to track 5, we have another cover. This is Talk to Me. It's a medley Talk to Me / Tallahassee Lassie. I really do like the Talk to Me part of this song. Like I really like Carl's vocal on it, even though it's always sounded a little off to me. Like maybe like he was like, it almost comes off as like he was slightly under the influence or something. Like it doesn't totally sound
Yeah.
like Carl to me, but I do really like his vocal. I think he was definitely the right choice to do the vocal on this one. Um, the Tallahassee Lassie part I find very kind of abrupt and annoying. Like
So jarring.
pretty smooth song, and then Tallahassee Lassie. I'm like, what the hell is this? But and it's kind of pointless because that section is so short too. Like it just comes in and then it's just gone after like 30 seconds. But I do really like this cover. Wouldn't say it's like one of the top covers on the album for me, but I do like it, and I like it would make like my Beach Boys playlist. So I enjoy it. What do you guys think of "Talk to Me, Tallahassee Lassie"?
I really like Carl's vocal on it. I actually kind of like the little jolt of the Tallahassee Lassie. I like it. It kind of gives a little energy. I mean, everybody's shaking their head. I really like it. I like the little jolt of the energy in there.
I'm with you.
And yeah, I really enjoy Carl's vocal on here. So I really enjoy it. Probably one of looking at the track list here right now. Yeah, it's probably my favorite cover on this side, on side one. Sorry, my favorite cover on there. But yeah, so yeah, I really enjoy it. And I like the Tallahassee Lassie for what it's worth.
Freaking hate that part. I'm with Jake. Like, you have such a, I mean, a little bit weird, but it's still a pretty good Carl vocal and pretty beautiful melody. And then right when you think he's about to hit the chorus, he's like, Tallahassee. It comes out of fucking nowhere. And like, what sucks is, like, you know what? I don't mind it being in a medley.
Yeah.
I think, like, seriously, every time, like the first time I listened to it, especially, I was like, oh, Carl's about to hit that chorus real good. And then he just says Tallahassee Lassie out of fucking nowhere. It just ruins the song for me. This is one I almost never come back to for that reason. 'Cause, like, I really loved that first part, and then kind of like Getting Hungry, that chorus just out of nowhere.
Well, I love that you mentioned Smiley Smile, because that's a perfect segue into what I was going to say, is that it's I believe one of, if not the only time the Beach Boys returned to like a Smile, Good Vibration style hard splice in the middle of a song to a completely unrelated musical fragment, which is like the core definition of Good Vibrations and Smile. And it's like one of the only times they ever did that again, albeit way less gracefully. So the Talk to Me part in a sort of like Spectre Righteous Brothers kind of way is like heavy, if you know what I mean. Like, maybe not in like a metal way, but like just in like a soulful emotion kind of way. And with the synth bass, it's like a emotional, like spiritual, dare I say, like kind of song. And yeah, and then the Tallahassee Lassie part comes in, and at first I used to not like it. And but then I just, like I said, like I listened to this album a lot, and I got so used to hearing it that way that now if I ever hear either of Talk to Me or Tallahassee Lassie on their own, it sounds like incomplete and odd because I'm so used to them being juxtaposed in the same song. Sort of like if you heard different parts of Good Vibrations as their own complete song, you'd be like, well, this is missing something, you know? So I'm so used to hearing them together now that, like, if I listen to either one, it sounds like empty. So yeah, Carl's vocal is definitely like a slurred out, opiate influenced performance. But it's a cool, like, you know, like I said, like earlier, like a Phil Spector tribute in a way. And it's like a sneak peek of Love You with all the synth stuff.
No, like thinking of like some of like the Smile, like the tracks from Smile, like the Pocket Symphonies, like in terms of like abrupt transitions, I guess I can kind of think of like Cabin Essence, where like you have like that very like mellow opening, like the light, the lamp, and fire mellow, but then pause, and then who ran the Iron Horse? You know, like that's also kind of but the difference is with that, it kind of pauses, you know, to transition. Where like with this, it literally like just out of nowhere, like there's no pause, just Tallahassee Lassie, and I don't know, it just sounds too abrupt, and it just doesn't work for me. But the Talk to Me part saves the song for me though, because I think I do really like Carl's vocal on it, and I think it's really pretty. So all right, we'll move on to the next track, and this is an original, and it's That Same Song. So this one's interesting to me because my favorite version of this song is not the one on this album. My favorite version is the one they did on the TV special with like the gospel choir from the It's Okay special in 1976. I think that version works really well because this song kind of has like that like gospel vibe to it, you know, like with the repeating vocals, like the I know, it took it so long time, you know, like I really like that. This album version's okay though. I wouldn't say it's a favorite of mine on the album, but I do like it. It's one of those songs where like I don't think it's too musically complex, but it's just a lot of fun. And I think it could have been a little better produced on the album. I think it could use some more, like maybe some more backing vocals, but I do like it. So what do you guys think of That Same Song?
I like the version in the special better with the choir, the church choir, but I like the song. It's fun. It definitely sounds like a song that Brian is having a blast singing, and he probably had a blast writing it. And I like the part about like the Gregorian chants, and we're singing that same. I like the lyrics, so I really enjoyed the song a lot. I think it's very fun.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It is on my Beach Boys playlist. I really enjoy it. I like I said, it's a lot of these songs that I like. They're not too serious. I'm not really expecting that. And this is one of those ones where I really have a good time listening to it. It's one of the few times where I really actually prefer Brian's kind of worn out voice compared to his earlier voice. I think it fits the song, kind of adds to that energy. Um, the choir version's really cool. But I think I return to this one more just because out of convenience. But
Yeah.
and I kind of feel like with a lot of these songs, especially in this specific year, in the specific era for Brian, you kind of want him to be having more fun doing this rather than him being miserable and not wanting to kind of produce an album for like 40 hours or like he did with Pet Sounds. You kind of want him to really enjoy the process, and I feel like he really did with this one. So I really appreciate this one.
I agree that it's a lot of fun. It's one that never particularly like lit up my world. And I think it's sort of one of the songs, a, a type of song that works extremely well on the album that it lives on, but maybe isn't particularly strong on its own. But as a part of 15 Big Ones, I do like enjoy it and think it like fits well with the other songs. Um, and the one thing about it that I do always like and is it's like a very brief musical version of what my like introduction to music history class in college was like, talking about the Gregorian chants and the choirs and sort of like that evolution, like it sort of runs through what took me a whole semester in about 2 minutes. So it's kind of funny in that way. And I, as a musician, I do resonate with the idea that like that all music is just music and we're all singing that same song and it's a universal language. Like it does sort of touch on some cool themes uh when you think about it.
I just wanted to say also, Riley, you mentioned like how you do like Brian's rougher vocal on this. I actually agree. I think like if he had like if his vocals were still like more intact, like they sounded more like he did like in the mid late '60s, this wouldn't work at all. I feel like it's the vocal that really makes this work. Like the way he's kind of just like shouting it. I also think he kind of plays into the fact that his voice is different. Like the part where he's like, "And we can take it one more," like he sings it very funny. And I feel like he's kind of playing into that. I also think Chapel of Love, I kind of think the same thing about. I feel like his rougher vocal is what makes it work. If it was a more smooth vocal, it would just be kind of a boring, uneventful.
Yeah.
But in this case, I actually do really like the song because of his vocals. So, all right. So we'll move on to what I think is one of the oddest songs on this album. One of the oddest songs in the band's discography, in my opinion. TM song. So of all the songs on the album, this is one of the ones I've listened to the least. So I kind of had to re-familiarize myself with it today. When I re-listened to the album as a whole. So this one opens up with like this like weird like fight sequence thing. I think it's between like Mike and Dennis or something. But the song itself, I think it's an Al sung song, and it has some nice moments. Like I think I've mentioned before in one of our previous episodes, I like the part where like the Maharishi gave it to me. And I like that part a lot. And I do think like there's some interesting, again, I'm not a musician, but I feel like I can kind of hear some like interesting stuff going on with like chord changes. But personally, this is not one of the stronger songs in the album, in my opinion. It's one of those songs that I think the band was just kind of having fun with. Of course, I know, Matt, your favorite, the Transcendental Meditation, the Maharishi stuff, coming up again. But I think it's just kind of a fun little song, like, but it doesn't do much for me. So what do you guys think of TM song?
I hate the thing at the beginning, the skit. I think it's stupid, first of all. Then I don't know. The song itself is just whatever. I don't really care for it that much. I think the only part I really like about the song was like this, sometimes it goes real fast and other times it goes real slow. I like that part. That's about it. Otherwise, it sounds like a commercial to me, which I don't like songs like that. So doesn't do much for me.
Yeah.
I think the opening skit was kind of a callback to the early '60s albums with like
Yeah, I was gonna say
Love
that
or
too.
Sonny Wilson.
Well, I hate that. I think that sucks. I hate it on the albums then, and I don't like it here either. Sorry.
Well, I'll always defend both sessions, but the rest I kind of get. But
Yeah, I hate Sonny Wilson, Cassius Love, whatever. I hate
what about
that so
Dick
much.
Rising?
What a guy, Dick Rising.
What a guy, Dick Rising. Capital executive. He's a real guy.
Yeah, I know.
But I mean, yeah, I kind of see this more as like a fun kind of like side little thing rather than like a serious track. One thing I got to give Al credit for, and I don't know if I mentioned this in the Al Jardine episode, is I kind of feel like with the TM stuff, he wasn't like so commercial or promotional of it. I mean, he wasn't like Mike where that was his whole personality. I feel like he's a lot more genuine with it rather than I'm TM, I do TM, so I'm much better than everybody else kind of thing. I think he genuinely did it and he wasn't trying to promote it. I mean, I know he wrote a lot of TM oriented songs, but he wasn't like Mike with it. So I really
Wasn't super on the nose, yeah.
right, I really appreciate that. And I feel like for this one especially, it was just more him having fun than uh I'm gonna make a song called Transcendental Meditation. It's gonna be the weirdest thing on Friends. So
Yeah, to me, sort of in a similar way of how Riley described Hadophonia, and to me, where it's just like you think like, oh, hey, there's maybe a nice song in here, but it's just over with so quick. You're like, hey, where did it go? And to me, it's almost like the Beach Boys equivalent of Her Majesty, by the Beatles, where it's just like an extremely brief, weird song, yet it's oddly kind of like pretty and charming. Yeah, I think a neat little song like does live within it, and it could have been like developed into like something full length that may have been like more captivating. But yeah, it's just like a little silly song that's maybe no more than a minute. It's goofy and fun. Yeah, and I do love your observation of it being like a throwback to the Beach Boys' earlier like comedic moments on their albums. Like I don't even live for those moments either, but to see that pattern is kind of cool.
One other thing I forgot to mention too, so like when I was listening to this earlier today, because again, I have not listened to this song many times, like ever. I literally like started laughing out loud, like when like the part after like it slows down, where like transcendental meditation. I was like, what the hell is this? Like this is such a freaking song. I didn't know that was coming because I hadn't listened to this song for so long, but I was like, oh my gosh, this is weird. All right, so moving on now, we're back to another cover. And to be honest, this one is one of my favorite Beach Boys covers. I might be in my top 5. Honestly, that's how much I like it. And it's Palisades Park. So I really love this cover, and a lot of it's because of Carl's vocal. I mean, Carl's vocal on this is just killer. I absolutely love it. He really sells the song. If I remember right, this was only like recorded on like it was like a first or second take of the song, and Carl just nailed it. And I remember, I think I read a quote where like Brian said like he was like so moved by it, like that Carl had nailed it so perfectly, like exactly the way he wanted it, that like it almost brought him to tears. And I thought that was really cool to read. I just love the energy of this. I love the backing vocals, like the run, run, running. Now the rides are running. And like, I know like the original version of this song, which I have heard, is like a lot faster. It's got like a higher upper tempo. But to be honest, I actually prefer this tempo. I think it works better as more of like a mid-tempo rocker. And also I know like if you've listened to this podcast before, like I don't care for a couple of the Beach Boys songs about amusement parks, like County Fair and amusement parks US. Because I've said like I find there's like annoying parts of those songs, and I'm not necessarily a huge fan of like the carnival sounds. But to me, this song it's done well, like it's done right. Like I do like the kind of like that little middle section with like the carnival noises, like the do 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 do, and I like even like the goofy like I don't know if it's Dennis doing the part in the middle where they're like, oh my god, like I actually don't mind it. I actually think it's kind of fun. So
Yeah.
I like this song a lot. I would say it's in my top 3 or 4 on the album, probably top 3. I really like it a lot. So what do you guys think of Palisades Park?
Yeah, I really like it a lot too. I love Carl's vocal on it. It has a nice energy to it. It's a lot of fun. The song itself is very fun.
Yeah.
I kind of like I kind of like that's a little bit slower tempo than the original by Freddie Canada. The original is like do. It's really, really fast, really high energy. But yeah, I really enjoy the song a lot. Everything you said, yep. And I actually don't really mind like the talk in the middle too, because it's fairly buried in the mix, so it's not like it's like too distracting. But yeah, I really enjoy this. I really enjoy this one a lot. definitely one of my favorites on. I think as a whole I like the covers on side 2 better than side 1, and this is definitely one of the reasons why.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I enjoy it a lot. It's probably one of my favorite covers on the album, but I don't know where it would rank on my Beach Boys like top 10 covers list. Maybe somewhere like maybe in the middle, but I definitely enjoy it. I don't really come back to this one a whole lot. I think there are two better covers on this album, but I think Jake probably agrees with me on that. But it's enjoyable. I'm not super familiar with the original version actually, so I think if I listen to that and then I listen to this one, I might have a better idea of where I really feel about the song. But I definitely enjoy it. It's definitely a lot better than any of the covers on side 1, for sure.
So, as we were talking about this song particularly, I kind of had an epiphany. Um, so not only did Dean Torrance design the album cover of 15 Big Ones, but you'll have to understand where I'm going with this, but on 15 Big Ones, the Beach Boys recorded two songs that Jan and Dean recorded previously to them, being Tallahassee, Lassie, and Palisades Park. And the reason I bring that up is that the Beach Boys, for a brief period of time, were Jan and Dean's backup band. And so I think there's a good chance that they may have learned to play those songs for Jan and Dean originally, when Jan and Dean were singing those songs on stage. Um, so that's just an aside and some little dots that I connected, that I've never thought about before, but kind of a cool thing to note. And yeah, so I love this recording so much. Like the way that Brian said it brought him to tears, I feel like I can very much relate to like how he felt, because it just hits me totally the same way. And I love it so much that I've spent months and months working on a cover of like their version of it, like not recreating the Freddie Cannon or the Jan and Dean, but like trying to like faithfully sort of reproduce what Brian did and sort of put my own spin on it. So I'm a big fan of this one. I love it.
That's awesome. Have you finished that cover?
Yeah, it's released on all streaming platforms and stuff.
Oh, I'm gonna have to give that a
Just
listen.
under my own name. Yeah.
Maybe we'll link that in the episode description so people can check that out.
I'd be so pleased. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love the song. And I did it all in tribute to Carl and Brian.
Awesome. No, I'll definitely give that a listen for sure. All right, so moving on. Now we get to an Al Jardine composition, and this is Susie Cincinnati. I know, Riley, you're really fond of this song, and I like it a lot too. I think it's a lot of fun. I know this song originally, it originated around the time of like the Sunflower sessions, like 1970-ish, 1971. And I know it also had, I believe, been previously released once or twice as like a B-side. But I do really like the song. I think it's a lot of fun. I think the lyrics are fun. Like it's about like a taxi cab driver in Cincinnati, and I love that like there actually was a real Susie Cincinnati that like the band actually met. I think they had her come on stage at like one of their shows in Ohio, which I think is pretty cool. I know Dennis kind of trashed this song. I think he called it a silly piece of shit, which I think, I mean, it's, like it's definitely, I would consider it kind of a more like lightweight rocker. Like it's definitely, I don't think it's anything too musically complex or crazy, but kind of like what you like about it, Riley. Like that riff is just so much fun. That down, that's what gets stuck in my head. I think it's a great, like, kind of like hook into the song, and I think it's a lot of fun. So, what do you guys think of Susie Cincinnati?
Yeah, I think it's fun. I think it's like you said, it's about a cab driver, female cab driver. So, the second song I think about a female cab driver. But yeah, I think it's a fun song.
Would the first be "Drive My Car" by the Beatles?
Well, that I was thinking of "Lady Cab Driver" by Prince from 1999. If you know that one.
That one.
But that song gets kind of explicit, far more than this. But this is a very fun song. It's kind of a cool influence where like Al got it from. It's actually like it actually shows that he had some songwriting chops. I know Al was often considered to be like one of the weaker songwriters in the group, and I do think that is true, but I do think that this is a very fun song, and it doesn't sound like a Kingston Trio song that I know of. But yeah, I really enjoy it. I'm just saying because I know there's a joke that he took a lot from the Kingston Trio. I think it's a really fun song. I really enjoy it on the record. I think it fits in well too with this album because this is a kind of fun, laid back album. So yeah, I really enjoy the song.
Yeah, I feel like Al kind of based his song around the riff that he wrote on the guitar. But but it's a whole lot of fun. That riff is so catchy. I really like that
So
part
fun
in
to
the middle.
play.
What?
So fun to play it on the
It
guitar.
is so much fun to play. It is. I tried to play it with my band. They said no.
Oh,
But
come on.
yeah, but it's a whole lot of fun. I love that part in the middle where they kind of you get to a little bit of a breakdown, then you just hear that down, 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 and they get back into it. That whole coda at the end where they're like, Susie, Cincinnati.
Cincinnati.
It's so catchy. This is my favorite song on the album. Al Jardine definitely has some songwriting chops on this one. Probably his most original song, and his
Mhm.
vocal, he fucking sells it.
Oh,
Mhm.
He rips
I
it.
haven't
Yeah.
really listened to any live recordings of it lately. I kind of want to right after we finish recording it, listen to one of them. I feel like this song totally
There's
rips.
one on Feel Flows.
there is. It's great. I listened to it more than this version, actually.
Yeah, I listened to most of the album version, but I feel like this shit totally rips. This I love this song. It's easily my most played song from 15 Big Ones. It's been one that I've been going back to a lot lately. I think partially in preparation for the episode and maybe the Al Jardine episode we did a while back, but I love it. It's so much fun. Easily my favorite song off the album.
Yeah, I think it's like definitely the closest the Beach Boys ever got to a Rolling Stones kind of vibe. And just it's such a classic riff, and to my ears, it sounds like it's played on a 12 string or doubled at the octave, and so it just has a really rich sound. And Al played the riff, which is cool. And another thing I like about this song is it's an instance where Brian Wilson returned to his original role as bassist. So, and not on a Moog, on an actual bass guitar. So you've got Brian playing the bass guitar on this song, which is cool. And yeah, it's definitely up there as one of my favorites, probably in general by the Beach Boys, just because it's so much fun for all the reasons you guys just described.
No, and I read that Brian actually liked the song himself because I think somebody asked him and he said he was included on the album because it's a good song. So that's cool that Brian appreciated the song as well. Um, you know what's funny? That part you mentioned at the end of the song, Riley, the with the part where they're like Susie Cincinnati. For some reason, I don't know if I'm crazy, but that's always reminded me of Wild Honey a little bit. I don't know why. Like maybe just like the shouting
Oh, I
vocals.
hear that. And the chords are the same. Are the chords of the Wild Honey chorus and of that Susie Cincinnati coda are the same,
Oh,
like,
really? I'm not
change.
crazy.
Yeah.
Thanks, Nate. Okay, so I'm not losing it. Okay, no, I've always noticed that, and I was like, huh, yeah. One other thing I wanted to ask you, Nate, because I'm sure you probably know, but so like the version of this that like the earlier version from like Feel Flows, like the 1970 version, like what are there's some differences in like the mix, right? Like the arrangement, because I feel like that version sounds better to my ears than the 15 Big Ones
Yeah,
version.
so as far as I know, the performances are identical and they're
Mhm.
just remixes. And the earliest versions of the song have like a cool car sound effect at the beginning that just
Mhm.
appeared on the 15 Big Ones mix. And I do definitely prefer Steve Desper's and Al's original mix that appeared on Feel Flows. Well, actually, a remix version appeared on Feel Flows, a 2020 remix. But yeah, I do. I mean, hell, I like the song in any version of it. But yeah, it's not uh, a case of like Be True to Your School or Help Me Rhonda where it's a different recording. It's as far as I know, all the same recording, just they remixed it a million damn times.
Yeah,
I
no,
do.
that's good to know. No, because when I was listening to 15 Big Ones like as a whole today, when I got to that song, I was kind of like, yeah, this doesn't sound quite as good as I remember it sounding on the version I listened to, like the Feel Flows version. So yeah, thanks for clearing that up. Um, all right,
Yeah,
so
it's a good example of how a mix can truly like impact the enjoyment of a song.
mm-hmm. All right, so we'll move on to the next track in the album, and we're back to another cover. And this is A Casual Look. So this song's kind of got like that doo-wop vibe going. It's a Mike Love lead, and I have to say, like the opening of this song definitely kind of like when I first heard it, it kind of had me concerned for how the rest of the song was gonna sound because it has that stupid da, 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 that I don't like from Louie Louie. It's like the exact same like stupid sounding tone that I don't really care for. So I was a little concerned. I was like, oh god. But honestly, the song's fine. Mike's vocal is fine on it. I can enjoy it. It's not one that I would say is a highlight of the album by any means, but I think it's an okay cover. I don't have too many more thoughts on it. So what do you guys think of A Casual Look?
I think it's decent. It's not my favorite cover on the album, but it's solid. It has some nice vocals on it. It's just whatever. It's just kind of
Yeah,
there.
that's what I think of it. Yeah, it's like fine.
I don't hate it, but I don't like love it either.
It's okay.
It's okay.
Yeah, I'd agree that it doesn't stand out to me as one of my favorites, and there's nothing particularly about the vocals or the melody that stands out to me too much. But for me, it's a great example of how I was describing at the beginning of the episode of Brian creating unique textures, because just the sound of the backing track and like the sound of the instruments and the instrument combinations is sort of like a unique sort of fuzzy, hazy sound that most people wouldn't put on a 50s cover. So for that, I think it's kind of cool, but it wouldn't like rank near the top of my ranking for this album. It's another one where I'd say like it definitely works even arguably quite well as a song on that album. But if I listened to it by itself or just discovered it on its own, I probably wouldn't be a huge fan.
Yeah. All right, so I guess we'll move on then. So we have another Mike vocal on a cover, and this one is Blueberry Hill, which is I think originally by Fats Domino.
That's the most famous version.
The most
Fats
famous
Domino. It's from the 40s originally.
So this one I'm not particularly fond of it, to be honest. I don't like the opening where like it's just kind of like there's like this. I think it's just like a bass and you just hear Mike's vocal like I found my thrill. I'm like, what is going on here? Once like the instrumentation comes in, like the arrangement, it's fine. There's the part I do like. The only part that really like kind of like sticks with me is that like I think it's like a chord change or a key change. The part where they're like, and all those vows you made. I really do like that part. But besides that, don't even remember that much from this song. So I can't really comment too much on it. I think it's just kind of another just middle of the road cover. It's inoffensive. It's not terrible, but I just don't think it's anything special. So what do you guys think?
Yeah, I agree. It's nothing special. It makes me just want to listen to Fats Domino. Just doesn't do much for me at all, honestly. Especially like because Fats Domino's version is amazing. That's like one of the greats.
Yeah, I mentioned I was like, this is a lot better.
Oh, it's a lot better. Honestly, like I think if you were to play this to some people, they would say this is why white people shouldn't sing this kind of music. Honestly, it's not that good. It really isn't.
It's okay. I
It's funny that that song is on this album because we've said it.
Yeah.
It's okay.
I don't think. I mean, I understand what you just said, Matt. I don't think it's really inoffensive, but I don't think it's great.
Oh no, I'm not saying I feel that way, but I'm saying some people might feel that way. Some people be like, oh, it's like, ugh, you know.
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of like some of the Beatles covers on their debut. It's they're all right. I mean, I think those are a lot better than what this is, but
those are a lot better. Those are
but I mean,
better.
similar case scenario where I much prefer the original, and I don't really get much from it.
So I like, maybe should be embarrassed to say that I'm not like too familiar with the original or with any other versions. I know for a fact I've heard them in movies or heard them in passing, but this is like the only version of the song that I've ever like specifically listened to like with intention and with focus. And yeah, I love this. And I know I've said it a few times about this album, but to me this album and Love You are like heavy. And I know that sounds ridiculous if you're thinking of like heavy metal, but they have weight, and they have weight is the best way I can explain it. Like Dennis's drums it's Hal Blaine on this one. It's Hal Blaine on this one, but Hal's backbeat is just like enormous, and the way the kind of slow tempo just all falls together, it feels heavy to me. It touches my heart in a weird way. And I think a lot of that has to do with the synthesizer, with like the playing the bass notes and sort of that undercurrent of just saw wave distortion underneath the song. It's kind of like a new wave kind of sound in a way, the way that Brian was using the synth bass. And so I just love it. And for me, the thing that really sells the song is that Hal Blaine was playing his monster kit. And for those unfamiliar, it was a drum kit with about 12 tom-toms all tuned chromatically so that Hal could play fills in the key of the song. And Hal just plays some crazy triplet fills on this song that like knock my socks off. Like Hal Blaine's fills on this song to me are like worth price of admission alone.
Well, I mean, I'm gonna give it another listen and just like
listen carefully for the drumming because the tom-tom fills are just out of sight, like masterfully played.
Okay, now I'm gonna definitely give it another listen. Also, which song is it? This one or A Casual Look? The one that has like the vocals at the end, like the da 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 da. I think it's like Dennis. Is that the? I think it's A Casual Look.
Yep, it's Casual
That's
Look.
Casual
Yeah.
Look.
Okay,
Yeah.
no, I was gonna mention I do like that a lot, but I forgot which song it was from. Okay, so A Casual Look. Okay.
They are quite
right.
similar to like 12/8 50s ballads, kind of like sandwiched
Yeah, that's
together
probably
on
why.
the album.
Because they're not only that, but then they also have Mike on lead on both too. So I can see why it makes. All right, so we'll move on to the last original on the album. But interestingly, this original was written many years before it was actually recorded for this album. The song is Back Home. So this is a Brian Wilson. He wrote it. Who did he? I forgot who he wrote it with.
Bob Norberg.
Bob Norberg. Yep.
So Brian and Bob Norberg wrote this song. It's from like I think 1963 originally, but it was revived for this album, and I do like this song a lot. I think it's a fun cover, fun original. I like Brian's vocal, even though again, like objectively, like if we're talking about like the vocal technically, it's probably not that great, but I think it adds some charm to it. I like the lyrics, about like going back home, and I think it's a lot of fun. I really like how the group all comes in on the chorus, like the back home I spent my summer. I think it's a great chorus, and I think it was
vocal on that chorus.
Yeah, I think it was smart of the group to bring back to revitalize this song and do it on this album because I think it's a highlight. So, what do you guys think of Back Home?
You're gonna hate me, but I like the '60s version better. This for me, I think Brian's vocal kind of ruins it. Honestly, it's very rough. I don't care for it very much. I like the backing vocals from the group, but I think his vocals just too rough for this song. And I think the song worked better when he was younger. It felt better for me when he was younger. Like now he's older now and he was like more like his mental state was more fragile. I don't know. It doesn't quite work for me. It's all right, but it doesn't quite work for me.
Yeah, I much prefer the '60s version. I feel like in concept for me, I the rougher vocal would add on to it, but I listened to the bootlegged '60s one, and it kind of blew me away how much his younger voice really honestly adds life to the song. Because I feel like this version's just like a regular bluesy track that, I mean, honestly, that kind of style and sound and I think progression, I've heard that before many times. But when I heard the '60s version, I was really blown away because his voice is so angelic on that one, and it honestly works a lot better than I thought it would. But that doesn't mean I don't enjoy this one on the album. I do enjoy this track. It's one of the better tracks, but after hearing that '60s version, I don't really enjoy it as much as I used to. So
yeah, I agree. I liked it better before I heard the '60s version. Then once I had the '60s version, I'm like, nah, that's better.
Yeah, it's interesting because this is one that they attempted a few times. So you've got the original '60s version. You've got sort of a bit of a punky version that they did during the Field Flows sessions with Mike on the verse vocals, and then you've got this 15 Big Ones version. And yeah, I wouldn't say that this one like I feel a similar way to Riley, that it's just like I've heard this before. I've even heard the Beach Boys do this kind of song before, and not necessarily breaking like new ground arrangement wise or composition wise. But I do want to say shout out to Bob Norberg, and I'm glad you guys said Norberg because he was a Jewish guy, and Murray was super anti-Semitic, and Murray made Capital write Norman on the original Beach Boys albums. So because he thought that the public would not want to buy the Beach Boys if they saw a Jewish name. And as a Jewish person myself, I always when I learned that, felt devastated for Bob. And so today, like whenever I talking with fellow Beach Boys fans and he comes up, I'm always happy to hear people say Norberg as like a remedy for that sort of gross situation. So I'm always happy when his name pops up on a Beach Boys record, for that, for that reason. It's a fun song. And
Yeah.
I do think it's kind of interesting. I'm not sure if it's on every of all the bootlegged versions, but on the original 60s version, it always sounds like at the very beginning, Miserlou is played for a second. The surf song.
Mm-hmm.
Just for a very brief moment, and then it stops and goes into the song. So that's always sort of like a weird Easter egg that I thought was kind of cool. I think it's like a mandolin.
No, honestly, I do need to give the original, like the 63 version, another listen because it's been a long time since I listened to it. I don't know how I forgot to listen to it prior to doing this episode, but yeah, I just haven't listened to it in a while. So I got to give it another listen.
I do like the saxophones on it though. Like it has a powerful sax section. I do like the baritone sax on it.
Yeah.
I think that was Steve Douglas and Jay Migliori and some of those Wrecking Crew guys came back for that song.
Cool. All right, so we're now on to the second to last song on the album. And this is honestly one of my favorite songs on the album. It might be my favorite cover. And it's In the Still of the Night. I absolutely love Dennis's vocal on this. Once again, another vocal that maybe isn't like objectively great, but I personally really love it. I think it's great. I think it suits the song really well. Dennis has a way of singing again. Like I think we've said this before, but like Dennis didn't have the best voice technically, but he could really sell a song and make it come off as you could really hear like the emotion in his voice, and it just feels genuine. And on this song, I think that really works. I think his vocal makes the song. I also really love the arrangement on this one. Like I love like the synths, like the keyboards, like in the background, especially like as the song is like fading out. I think it's just a really pretty arrangement and a great vocal. And I honestly I love this song. And this is one of those ones again where like I've heard the original, and it probably because I heard this version first. This probably has to do with it, but I do prefer the Beach Boys version. So
Yeah, I really like Dennis's vocal on here. I think this is one of the better covers. I think his like more raw vocal works for this song. Do I like it better than the original? I'm not sure because I think the original is pretty seminal for me. It's like a classic doo-wop song. But yeah, I really like the Beach Boys version, and I kind of like the drum sound on it. Boom, 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 boom. I like the backing vocals they did. Yeah, I really enjoy it.
It's really good. I really like it. This was actually the first song off the album that I really enjoyed when I gave it my first listen when I was originally getting into the band. I clicked on it because I recognized the song, and I didn't really know Dennis's vocals kind of at that point. I was still kind of getting familiar with the band, but I really liked it from the get-go. I kind of feel like Dennis's rough vocal kind of adds to the song for me. I mean, I'm gonna prefer any of the 60s versions of this song. I feel like that's where all the charm really is, but this kind of is up there for me with those versions. I mean, Dennis's rough vocal, it's really soulful. There's a lot of spirit in it, and I feel like in a song like this where it's kind of like about longing, I feel like Dennis's vocal matches it perfectly. So I mean, this is probably my favorite cover off the album. It still really clicks with me. um I honestly might listen to this version as much as I do as some of the other 60s ones. Maybe more. I think kind of since I've been into the band, I've kind of come to this one a bit more often, but really great vocal from Dennis. One of his better vocals, period, with the band. Um, I love it.
I couldn't agree more. And I just remembered too that Jane and Dean, this is another song that Jane and Dean beat the Beach Boys to. They did this back in the 60s. So it's actually a total of 3 songs on this album that the Beach Boys played that Jane and Dean played first, which I don't think is a coincidence. Like they were so closely associated that I don't think it's a coincidence. But yeah, I love, just love this recording. Classic Dennis Wilson vocals, and drumming. The drums are just so powerful. And I like that on this album, I think as far as Dennis's drumming goes, he uses sparseness to his advantage. Everyone and their mother knows the expression that music is all about, like the silence in between. And I think Dennis was like a master of that because he really uses like space and minimalism to like a great effect with his drumming on this song. So yeah, it's just a terrific recording. I can't get enough of it.
Yeah. No, this is one where like when we do get that eventual 15 Big Ones Love You box set, like if they release like any like backing tracks, I love to just hear like the backing track to this one because I think the arrangement's really cool.
Totally.
The vocal really makes this song, and like I don't know, I just the way Dennis sings every line is just so good. Like the I remember that night in May, like it's such a good vocal. I love it. All right, so we'll move on to the final track on 15 Big Ones. And I personally feel this album closes on a really, really high note. This is one of my favorite songs on the album. It might be my favorite song on the album. And this is Just Once in My Life. This song was originally done by the Righteous Brothers. And this version, I just find it really moving. And I think a lot of it is both the arrangement with the synths. I think it's really done well, and I really like Brian's vocal on it, even though it's again objectively not great, but it just comes off as sounding so desperate. Like he's just kind of shouting the chorus like a good thing I found. Like it just sounds so desperate to me, and like you can almost like hear like the pain in his voice, and I find the song really moving for that reason. I think it's a great, really great cover. I love Carl's parts. I love like the bridge section. That's where like you really hear the synth come in, like but when it comes in and then Carl like that old pot of gold, it's just a really great vocal from him, and I absolutely love this song. I think they couldn't have closed the album stronger. I think it's great. So, and I do prefer this to the original, which I know some people might say that's crazy, but I do. So, what do you guys think?
Yeah, I think it's a great cover. I don't know if it's better than the original because I do think the original is one of Spector's best productions, but I do really enjoy it. And speaking of Spector, this is another one. It's kind of like a tribute to Spector. I like that. I think Brian and Carl's vocals work really good on this song. There's kind of like there's like a longing, a yearning in the lyrics that I think you kind of hear in the vocals. I think it's a great way to end the album. One of the best covers on the album and a real high point for me.
Yeah, definitely one of the higher points on the album. Definitely the second best cover for me on here. The vocals on this especially absolutely incredible, especially at the ending part. Um, I've been it's been growing on me. This one in particular because I do really like the Righteous Brothers version, but like the past couple of weeks I've been listening to this song. It's starting to grow on me. The vocals at the end absolutely incredible. And I think Jake kind of put it best. It's very moving. It's very moving. Still growing on me though.
Yeah, I love it so much too, and it is one of those cases where I do also find it really hard to say whether I prefer Phil's version or the Beach Boys version because it's just such an amazing song, and the arrangements are pretty like radically different. Um, Spector produced it in a way that only he could, and so did Brian too. Like Brian's version is very Brian and very synth heavy, and yeah, it's just like I do love that the album closes with two songs of the Wilson brothers singing together, and it sort of is like arguably like a bit of a throwback to when those guys would sing in their bedroom when they were little kids, and like that same feeling comes through. And so yeah, like you guys said, it's like such a phenomenal closer for the album. I think there is an argument to be made that it's not but it's one of the highlights of like their whole 70s output.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that I would just be remiss if I didn't mention is so like we've all said, it's a Phil Spector song, and there's a demo that floats around on the internet that Phil recorded for the Righteous Brothers, where Phil was so particular about how he wanted his vocals to sound that he would record demos of him singing the song to give to the artist to listen to before they sung it. And most of those disappeared and are long gone in history. But one that survived and made its way onto bootlegs and onto the internet is Phil demoing Just Once in My Life. And to hear a young Phil, who, as we know, went through a life of pain and debauchery and quite literally ended with a bang, to hear like the young Phil before all of the madness and before all of the drama, like young Phil singing that song is like incredibly moving. So I would recommend everyone to check out that version.
Yeah, I mean, you said this is like a highlight too from like that 70s period. Like that's an argument. I would agree. Personally, like again, I love you. This ranks right up there with the highlights from that album for me. Like if this was on there, I would definitely rank it very highly. I think it also is like a great segue into Love You, considering like this is the closing track on the album. I think this one really previews Love You a lot because you really hear the synth on this one, in the arrangement. And as everybody said, I mean, it's such the song is, you get that feeling of longing, and that just really does it for me. It just really moves me a lot. Like Carl at the end, like I work hard every day, baby, don't leave me. Like it's so moving. I absolutely love it. I'm really happy that they chose the song to close the album. So
Yeah.
It's kind of like when you're watching a TV show and they say, next up, next week on the next episode, and give you like a little slice of what you're going to see next time. It's definitely like the
Yeah.
sneak peek of what you're about to get on Love You. It like
Yeah.
warming you up for what you're about to get on Love You.
I kind of feel like Brian's voice on this one's actually really good too. I feel like this is kind of the bridge voice that you kind of heard on that In the Back of My Mind piano thing he did in 75. I feel
Totally.
like you still kind of have a remnant of that voice right before he kind of hits where I guess it's kind of like whatever the opposite of a peak is in Love You. Because I mean, while I like a lot of his vocals on Love You,
Trough.
while I like a lot of his vocals on Love You, I still feel like his voice was nowhere near what it could have been and what it should have been. But I feel like you still have that old Brian voice shining through on this one.
So now that we have wrapped up our track by track rundown, do you guys want to? I know Nate, you're super familiar with this album. You want to go into like some of the outtakes and extra material that was recorded around this time? I personally heard a decent amount of it, and some of it I like. So you want to kind of get into some of that?
Yeah, so I do yeah, it's sort of like they, as I said earlier, they recorded dozens and dozens of songs. So I guess I'll just name a few that stand out to me. And you guys can too. One thing they recorded, or at least rehearsed, I'm not sure if they ever actually, if it made it to tape, but it was written during this time, is 10,000 Years, which is one of my favorite Mike Love, probably my number one favorite Mike Love solo song. But it was actually a co-write between Dennis and Mike, and it melodically definitely has like that Dennis Pacific Ocean Blue stamp with kind of how bluesy it is. So I think it's one of their best collaborations, and I'm really glad that Mike finally got around to finishing it in 2017. Um, so I love 10,000 Years, and another one that took a while to finish, Don't Fight the Sea, was started around this time, and which the whole band completed and added their vocals to, which was really special. And trying to remember if anything else stands out to me as like big highlights. Oh, Rainbows, a Dennis Wilson song, Rainbows, another great Dennis song, and another great Mike song that it's interesting. Like a lot of songs that are on Unleash the Love began during the 15 Big Ones. Another one being Glow Crescent Glow, which eventually became retitled as Crescent Moon. But that's another like really wonderful Mike song. Yeah, so all the guys were still contributing and writing during the making of this album, but it all got so rushed that a lot of the great originals ended up on solo projects or on much later albums.
Yeah, I really like 10,000 Years Ago. That one fucking groovy. I love it.
So good.
I really like their I guess it's more like an Al cover than a band cover of Moni Moni. I don't know if that was
I
like
love it too, yeah.
if it was like cleaned up a bit, I might prefer over I think it was a Billy Idol one.
Yeah, Billy
I
Idol.
totally prefer it too.
It's Al puts a really good vocal on that one.
Yeah. Yeah,
Their version of Sea Cruise is pretty cool. I really like that one.
Oh, thank you for bringing that up. Thank you. I love that. Dennis rocking, and it got put out on 10 Years of Harmony.
And yeah, Jake, I think you said it should have made the album. I agree.
Yeah, the ooh-wee, baby. Oh, it's great. I love it.
Their version of Shake, Rattle, and Roll is also pretty good. I feel like some of these covers that became outtakes should have replaced the bad ones, but I know some of those bad ones kind of fit what Brian was trying to do for the album more than Money Money or Shake, Rattle, and Roll. He probably much preferred Casual Look and Blueberry
Yeah.
Hill, but I don't know.
I know of all the stuff that they've released out of the vaults, it's amazing that so many of those really solid rock and roll covers are still unreleased,
Hmm. Yeah.
at least officially.
Well, hopefully, we got some of these box, the box set coming up soon. So hopefully we get some of this stuff out. That'd be really awesome to hear. Also another kind of, this is more of a curiosity than like a highlight or anything, but the song Short Skirts. Like, I feel like that could be kind of interesting. Like if that had been finished, it's got like an interesting backing track with that down, down,
Yeah,
down.
so I was gonna confirm that you've heard it. Yeah, it's
Yeah, I
really
have.
cool.
it has
I'd like to see what would have been done with that. The title kind of worries me in terms of like what the lyrical content of it would have been, like the short skirts, like what would we be singing about here? But I think it would have been interesting to hear like a finished version of that.
yeah, definitely
I almost could have
pretty
sworn I
melody.
have heard a vocal version that someone may have sent me at some point.
Huh.
Um,
Interesting.
I can't, but I feel like that may exist, or at least some kind of demo.
Yeah.
I see the song recorded around this time called Secret Love. Is this a Mike Love song, Nate, or no? Because I've never.
I actually haven't heard of that one.
Okay, because this is just based on the wiki page.
Oh yeah, a lot of those are like Caribou tracks or
Okay.
it's like 74 because they were writing 40 songs, but it doesn't mean they finished 40 songs.
California Feelings, another one they started at this time.
Yeah, a lot of the Caribou stuff or the Caribou era stuff, like from 74, where they have Steve Kalinich and helping out Brian with California Feeling. Forgot the other one he helped out
My
on.
Love Lives On.
Child
Dennis,
of
I think.
Winter.
Oh yeah, that
Child
too.
of Winter. We got to
What
talk about it
what
at
a-
some point, Jake.
No, I mean we can talk about it, but I'm just gonna rip on it. So,
But I mean, this is stuff where Ricky was still part of the band, so I mean, it's kind of 15 big ones. But I honestly see a lot of that style fitting a bit more of Holland than 15 big ones, especially when you get to songs like River Song. That was
Oh yeah, another one that was right.
initially recorded in 74, where I mean, the guitar on that one fucking rips. I love that. I wish that was a
Dude,
finished
yes,
version.
the Beach Boys version has that
Yeah.
real prominent guitar, and it sounds a little down-tuned or something. So good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
that riff.
when I first heard that, I sent it. When I first heard that, I just thought like, oh my god, Riley would love this shit, and I immediately sent it to
Yeah,
him. And he was, yeah, I love it.
that guitar riff, it's so like I want to say Brit poppy almost. Like it's honestly sounds like something like Noel Gallagher would do with Oasis or whatever. But
I
maybe
just had to learn it last week. I'm like, okay, I've wanted to learn the River Song on guitar so long. Now I've got to just commit and sit down and do it. Yeah, it's so
it's
good.
such a. I want to learn how to play that on guitar too. That's like such a cool ass riff. But I kind of I mention this a lot, and I especially say this to Jake like literally like every week. Like I kind of see this Caribou stuff that they did, or like I know they only really recorded like 2 real songs at Caribou, but that kind of 74 material where it still had a bit of that hard rocking stuff that was found in Holland. I kind of wonder like what direction they would have went in if Endless Summer didn't happen, and they kept it at the very least Ricky in the band. Because I mean, you like stuff like I feel like they were going into a more melodic direction. Because I mean, Good Timin was also recorded or initially recorded around this time, and that's a bit like a bit of a throwback. But I mean, the initial backing track was like super stripped back compared to what you found on LA. And you see a song like River Song, and then you got some of the other stuff like Barnyard Blues and stuff where it's kind of like Holland, where it's stripped back, but it's also far more melodic than you found on songs like Leaving This Town or stuff like that.
Yeah, it's interesting that whole sort of Caribou era definitely is sort of like a bridge between the Blondie and Ricky era and the 15 big ones, Brian's back era. Because you can sort of hear a bit of each era, and they're sort of in a transitionary period. Yeah, it's easy to wish that Caribou stuff with Gercio could have like yielded more. And I know that Dennis particularly enjoyed being there. But in a weird way, like I do, especially with how much we've been talking about the album, like really wonder what it could have been like, say that they did the full original album and the full oldies album, or if maybe they continued on in the progressive kind of music genre. Like this discussion does make me long for that, but I'm also uh so happy for and thankful for 15 Big Ones and Love You and like the albums just for the way they are. And it's easy to like wish the Beach Boys gave us more, but it's like also amazing how much they have given us, you know? And so few bands have catalogs like the Beach Boys where you can just continuously dig and dig and dig and learn and learn and learn.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so deep. You know, there's just so many albums and so many. And again, like this is a band that has a lot of great material that went unreleased. You know, that's just crazy. It's like beyond just the fact that you already have so many officially released studio albums, you have so many outtakes, all these box sets that have come out over the past decade or so. There's so much to explore. And it's like just when I think like I've heard everything, I hear something new that just blows me away, which is like what's so much fun with this band, you know?
Yeah, for me, I've had a lot of fun taking albums that I don't particularly love and making myself like digest them until I can appreciate and understand them. Like I
Yeah.
did that with 15 Big Ones and MIU and Keeping the Summer Alive. Like I didn't like any of those albums at first, but like I knew how passionate I was about this band and like committed to listening fully and just like soaking it all in. And now I wouldn't trade these albums like for the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was me with Love You, honestly, because initially like I only liked a couple of, or a few songs, but I knew like, you know, people had really raved about it and I was like, you know, maybe I'm just not getting it. So I just kept listening and over time it just kept growing on me and growing on me and now it's like it's literally a top 3 Beach Boys album for me. So
Yeah. I mean, as much as I wish we kind of got a 74 album with the material they did then, I gotta be honest, I probably wouldn't have LA or 85 if they kind of went down that path.
Yeah, like it's cool that they went in so many different directions and you know, like LA, you got like a basically a Beach Boys yacht rock album, and of course they made the couple rap songs and a country album, and like who knows if we would have gotten all that if they stayed in like the Riley lane where he wanted them to be.
Mm-hmm.
No Steve
So what
Levine.
do you guys think of the cover?
I love it.
Yeah, I think it's pretty
I don't.
iconic. Like like
It's
I don't feel strongly like necessarily upon first seeing it, or like I don't think it's like an artistic masterpiece, but I think it's just like I don't know about you guys, but every time I go to a record store, it's pretty much guaranteed gonna be there. Every half price books. It's like it's just like one of those, I feel like it's one of those American things. Like everyone's probably seen it out of the corner of their eye. It's just like
yeah.
kind of like Pet Sounds or you know, different album covers where they might not be amazing in themselves, but you just see it and you grow to love it and it becomes a part of like the cultural zeitgeist.
Oh, I just like it. I've always loved it. It's weird because this is the one of the few albums I don't have as a vinyl or on vinyl, but I kind of want to get it for the cover alone because I love the gatefold. Um, I love how colorful it is. I like the deep blue background with the like the different Olympic rings, and you have like the little like jukebox little like light up thing around it. It's so cool. I
Yeah,
mean,
Dean was a great designer.
my dad like made me watch Happy Days as a kid, so I mean I maybe that's the reason why it clicks with me. I mean, this is really the Happy Days album by them, so
Yeah,
good and bad, it is the Happy Days Beach Boys album. Um,
I
but
totally agree.
the cover is
And
so
it's funny.
cool. I like the pictures of them too. I Dennis's pictures like super like it's so cool. I don't know why. I really dig it. Brian's picture is not very flattering, but a lot of pictures of Brian
No, it's not.
from this era were not flattering. But I love the cover. It might be in my top 5 Beach Boys covers. So
Wow.
yeah.
That's crazy. No, my I remember Nate, you when we have Justin on, Justin one time said that he was thinking about buying the album, but he was too embarrassed to have to like bring it up to the register and have them like look at the cover, which I think is really ironic because it's like now, you know, like Riley's like totally loves the cover. So it's interesting how we all have different opinions on it. But I'm of the opinion it's grown on me. I think it's like charming in a way. You know, I feel like it kind of like reflects the music on the album in a way, but I do think it looks very dated. I think it's one of their most dated looking album covers. I don't think, honestly, the guys look particularly great on it. I mean, Carl looks fine. This looks all right. But, like,
Yeah.
yeah, Brian, that's a horrible picture of Brian. Like, he just does not look well in it.
It is
And
funny to juxtapose like the hippie Beach Boys on this album cover compared to like the clean cut surfers on the early
right.
album covers.
And like even like the picture of Al, I don't think is great. Mike looks kind of
Yeah, the
weird.
side profile.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know why they went with that. But again, I will say, like, I think it was Dean Torrance that did this cover.
Yep.
Well, I will say
And Love You too.
that's what I was gonna say. He rebounded greatly with his next album cover, Love You. So I will give him that. But this one I think definitely is one of their more dated looking album covers.
And the logo.
Both of them look a lot like the way the albums sound, if that's even possible.
That's what I kind of said, I think. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Same
Weird
with
in a way. Yeah. Well, that one especially. Yeah, for sure.
I also sort of get like a yearbook kind of vibe a little bit from it.
Yeah.
Which is funny because they did their 50th anniversary program as if it was a yearbook, I think. I didn't see the 50th, but I think I recall seeing that they did a program like that.
Mm-hmm. And of course, we also have to mention that like this was when like the current Beach Boys logo like first appeared, like the current logo that you see.
Yeah, which Dean designed. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I really like that logo a lot. I think it's great. And again, I do feel like when I do see that logo, I do kind of associate it with like the beginning of like the nostalgia period, kind of for the band of like like the Goldie, like the oldies jukebox type period. But still, I think there's a lot of charm to it, and I do like the logo a lot. I think Dean did a good job with that.
It was definitely about time that they had their own version of like how the Beatles have their iconic font and drop T thing. Like it's cool that the Beach Boys got their own version of that where you can like see it from like a mile away and recognize that it's their logo, which makes me a little bummed that they changed it after all these years. On most of their official stuff, it's like a new version. But Dean actually did do the new version too, which I found out, which is amazing because he's 83 or 4. So
they have a new logo?
Yeah, it's incredibly similar, but a little different. A little more 2024.
Yep.
But I think they did it 2 years ago for the 60th.
Oh, I see it. It's
fine. It's fine.
Yeah. It is definitely like a modernization of it, but that 15 Big Ones logo is pretty classic.
Yeah. All right, so now I do want to mention before we kind of wrap up here, I do want to go into some like critic reviews of this album. So this could be kind of fun just because I know this album was very like polarizing at the time and today. So let's get into a couple of those. So one review that stood out to me was from the Village Voice, where they described the album as the kind of music one might expect to find at a rock star's funeral, which I thought was pretty brutal.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that's a really
Cincinnati,
brutal.
My funeral.
Right, I could live with that.
Choice.
They better play rock and roll music at my funeral or I'm gonna be pissed.
But it's no sin, it's that time again.
It's that time again, to bury Riley. Another review that I thought was kind of funny. Jim Miller of Rolling Stone, he said that the album was the most idiosyncratic and flaky record I have heard in some time, yet it fascinates me. And I feel like that's pretty much my opinion on it too. Like I feel like that's pretty much how I feel about it. Like it's so weird and different and like just odd, but yet I feel like that's why I enjoy it. Like I almost feel like it's the oddness of the album and how like distinct and different it is that makes me appreciate it. So I thought that was an interesting comment. Another interesting comment I saw, this is from one of our favorite reviewers that we bring up a lot, Robert Kreisgau. He bemoaned the selection of covers and their lack of a playful, goofy vocal intensity. There was another review from Pitchfork where they described the album as muddy and confused, but they did point out that Hadophonia and Back Home were good originals, so that's good. Also, they said that with the exception of Just Once in My Life, the covers are notable only for the morbid fascination they hold. Brian's one sweet falsetto is reduced to a hoarse crackle. As a result, Mike Love's painful nasal whine is the dominant voice of the record. So that's another pretty brutal review. But I do find the morbid fascination quote kind of funny because I do kind of feel like I can kind of see where that's coming from, because it's just like I think like some of the songs I can see why people view them as more of like fascinating, more of a fascinating or like a curiosity than they actually enjoy it, just because
like of watching a car crash.
Exactly. You can't look away. Exactly. Yeah. Perfect way to put it. And then to say some positive comment. On the liner notes for this album, when it was re-released in 2000, it was written by the musician from the Smithereens, Dennis Dyken, I believe his name is. Um, his comment about the album was that if you can accept all of the criticisms and put it behind you that this isn't Smile, Pet Sounds, or even Wild Honey, give 15 Big Ones a spin and dig on what is a very cool and fun Beach Boys album, which I thought was a great way to put it, because it's kind of like what you say about Beach Boys 85, Riley. You can't go into it expecting a Pet Sounds or a Smile or a whatever, a Sunflower. It's its own thing, and I think if you go into it with that mindset and you're also not going into it looking at like all these negative comments about it, I think you can definitely find some charm and appreciate the album. So I thought that was a good comment.
That's been my like gateway to fully appreciating the Beach Boys fully. Is not everything's going to be a summer surf hit, not everything's going to be Pet Sounds, and just to appreciate it all like for what it is. And that's when I think it really sinks in how rich the catalog is.
I've definitely gained a little bit of an appreciation for this album. I mean, I don't think I'm going to listen to it fully in a really long time, but some of the standouts on here have kind of been in my rotation lately, especially Susie Cincinnati. And well, Evan's always in my rotation, but especially more now. Everyone's in Love with You. I mean, it's been in my rotation a bit. I mean, it's been growing on me for a while, and I've always liked it, but it's really starting to build up for me, and I just wish it wasn't Bruce Johnston produced, but it's whatever. Bruce didn't produce it, but it sounds like freaking Tears in the Morning or whatever. Just like, but I mean, I've definitely gained a bit of an appreciation for it. Definitely gotta give Palisades Park a couple more spins, because I could definitely see that one starting to grow on me a lot more.
And they did that one live too at the time. Like if you listen to like some like bootleg, like some concert recordings from like '76, like that big stadium tour, they do Palisades Park. It's like one of their opener. It sounds awesome. So love to get a version of that.
Me too. I've somehow missed that when I've listened to so many bootlegs, especially from this period. But I've been searching for a live Palisades Park, so I'm excited to hear that when I get my hands on it.
Yeah, it's out there. And honestly, I really hope when they do the 15 Big Ones Love You box set that we know is coming. I really hope like we get a lot of live material from that time. Like I would love to get a full show. Like give us like a full like Anaheim show or something from one of those big stadiums, because I know they were recording some of those shows. So I would love to hear like a full show and get officially released versions of some of those songs. Obviously, some of them are out. Like back home, we got On Feel Flows and Susie Cincinnati, but I would love to hear more from that era. So
yeah. I think
you go right.
I think I'd want a 74 live show. I mean, that was when they were Rolling Stone band of the year, and I feel like you definitely have a lot more variety with it rather than just a lot of like the summer hits that they were doing. I mean, more in 75 and 76. I mean, kind of want a live version of Sail on Sailor. I know for a fact they did Big Sur, I think in 74, especially early on. But I feel like you get a lot more variety with those shows than you would in 76 or yeah. But at the same time, there's a live version of Roller Skating Child or something from
yeah, and it kicks ass. So
I'm sure it does.
The tempo should have been that fast on the album because it rips, man.
Would you guys prefer, if you recall, do you remember how, for example, Sunshine Tomorrow was Wild Honey and Smiley Smiley sessions basically packaged together? Feel Flows and Sail on Sailor were the same things for their respective era of combining basically the era of which two albums were recorded into one big box set. But if you recall in 2018 with the Friends in 2020, they did them as separate sets. Do you guys think it would be better serving for 15 Big Ones and Love You to be together on one big box set, or would you rather have them be two separate sets?
I think they would fit well together as long as that would not prevent the adult child stuff from coming out with Love You.
I would really a trilogy.
I have a problem with that as long as it doesn't affect that. If they wanted to release 15 Big Ones separately and then they do Love You and like Adult Child like together, I would be fine with that too. But I do think like just covering that whole period would be great. I just think it would be great to make, because you can make a really big box set out of that between, Outtakes, and session highlights and live show recordings. I think that would be a great box set. So that I will definitely be on the lookout for that once it's announced. So.
Oh yeah, because I mean, Sail On is just 1 year, and they packaged together five records.
Yeah.
Do 15 Big Ones, Love You, and Adult Child as one. And the best part about Adult Child is you could seriously like package just outtakes on that one.
Yeah.
Yes, because I mean, there is kind of a set track list for Adult Child. At the same time, I mean, you could just package some extra shit on there. I mean, you could fit 46 minutes of material on it, and then you could just get maybe like a live disc or two live discs for like Anaheim or something, and then just call it a day. I would spend a lot of money on that. I know I would.
Me too. I do tend to think of a lot of the Beach Boys' career as like segments and chapters. Like it's easy to think of all the early surf albums as kind of one bag, and then it's easy for me to think of like 2020 Sunflower Surfs Up in a similar vein. So yeah, I think all 15 Big Ones, Love You, and Adult Child are all kind of strengthened by seeing them as like a trilogy and seeing them sort of as one big era.
Yeah.
Because you can sort of like see the consistencies, see what Brian was going for. Yeah, I'm quite excited for that set.
Yeah.
Do you think they'd give Adult Child its own like name on that like part of the set, or do you think they would just call it Outtakes or something? Because I know Adult Child, I mean, it was an album, but
that's a really interesting question.
Yeah, I never thought of that, but you're right though. You do have a point.
Because like it wasn't an album. They didn't really. I think the name came much later, right? But
it's been a mystery I've been trying to solve recently because some people have been telling me that it's a concept album of adult songs, like Still I Dream of It and some of the more emotional songs with like, really childish songs. And that was Brian's idea. And I kind of buy it, and it made the album click for me, but I also think that might just be reading into it.
Yeah, because I mean, Adult Child is a fitting name, but I don't know if the band would have really like called it that. Who knows?
Yeah, it is. That whole like little segment of the band is confusing.
Yet it's fascinating at the same time. That's why I love reading about that stuff. It's like such a weird period, like life is for the living, and oh my gosh.
Yeah, I mean that's a good because I mean because that'd be kind of more of a reason just to package all the outtakes into one, jamming into one disc where you have like the Adult Child tracks, but you also have like I don't know if they would put Lazy Lizzie on there, but
that's never getting released. I can't. They don't want that shit. They do not want that out. Just like
do you think they'll put Hey Little Tomboy on it?
They're not going to re-release. Nope, no way.
I think both of them probably will.
Never do that.
Just for the copyright, though.
What did you say?
I think both of them probably will make it onto the box set. Just for money's sake.
Yeah. Well, there would be a disclaimer.
Because I know that Brian didn't want Thank Him or My Solution released, like adamantly didn't want them released, and yet when each of their respective copyright extension year came, Capitol released them, no problem, no hesitation.
See, but I'm not viewing it from a Brian perspective.
Yeah, you're saying from like society.
Somebody in the band is gonna say no to it. Just be like, I don't know, somebody being like, no, we can't release this, just because. Like, I know, like, with these box sets, like, really, it's, like, the diehard fans that are buying them. So it's not like this is, like, something that's going to be bought by, like, the widespread, like, general public. Yeah. But, like, still, I mean, I feel like that's a song that, like, the band kind of wants to cover up, even though I have said before, I do enjoy it melodically. And I almost find the lyrics so bad that it's almost enjoyable in a way because how stupid they are.
But I mean,
yeah.
Imagine, like, the TikTok market where they're like, here's the new Beach Boys box set. Here's the highlights, and then they have like Hey Little Tomboy playing in the back. It's like, turn you into a girl. rolling up to heaven. Imagine that getting a release too. Justin said he thinks that would get released eventually. That's another one. There's no way in hell they're gonna release a song where they're saying fucking tits and shit. It's just not gonna happen. Dude, they should.
It would be the funniest thing ever if that got a release.
I do think they probably, like, as an organization, accepted that Hey Little Tomboy is already out in the world, type of thing. And I assume
Yeah.
it'll be like released with the other songs that it lives with. However, since Lazy Lizzy never made it out officially,
no,
I
it's
think
yeah.
that's clearly for a reason, and I think uh I can definitely imagine Mike and Bruce and Al particularly not being real warm on that one. But musically, it's like it's
Yeah,
really good musically. Like there's some really crazy arrangement stuff going on in that song, but it's such a trip.
But at the same time, they might just do like, because I mean, they might cover 74. They could just put like the Caribou stuff on there and then call it a day.
Are we gonna get an official release of Battle Hymn of the?
An official release of
Right.
Child of Winter?
No, no, we don't need that. No,
It's
like
kind
a
of funny.
Christmas release, Christmas special. There you go.
It is
See,
funny
That's
how
what they
we
get my use set.
see why this song bombed 40 years later,
it's
or
like
50,
how
50
we
years.
were joking about a few like sneak preview type of thing. Child of Winter is kind of like the sneak preview of 15 Big Ones, like with the synth and Mike doing the nasal thing and then Dennis back on the drums. It is sort of like what you're about to get more of on 15 Big
I thought
Ones.
Ricky was on drums for that one.
Oh, yeah, you might be right. Yeah, I think you are. I think for sure you are right actually about that.
But that was Ricky's breaking point. He's like, fuck Child.
Yeah.
God, that song is so freaking weird. Like the "Here Comes Santa" when that comes in, I'm like, oh my god, this is like holy shit.
I know it is. Imagine hearing that like in the whole Christmas playlist on the radio. That would be a trip.
Throw that on like the retail playlist and see how people
Yeah,
react.
yeah.
Yeah. All right, I think we can wrap it up there. One last comment I wanted to make. One last thing I wanted to share. So we know Brian has cited multiple albums by the Beach Boys as being like his favorite album that they've ever done. But he did say, I think it was like in the late 90s at one point, he said that 15 Big Ones and Love You were his two favorite albums that the band ever did. And I think he said something like that's where the goods are or something, which I thought was really funny. I think it shows that like those recordings meant a lot to Brian too, like that part of his life. And, like you said, like paying tribute to Spectre on 15 Big Ones. And then, on Love You just being a really personal album to him. So I thought that was kind of a cool quote, and it kind of shows that like, Brian still appreciates his work on this album. So I thought that was kind of cool to read.
Yeah.
Yeah, that quote is what made me how I mentioned earlier about like committing to like digesting the albums and like to maybe breaking through my initial lackluster response was
Mm-hmm.
like seeing how much Brian loves this album, and I was like, okay, like clearly if Brian stands by it so much, like I it deserves like
Yeah.
a real genuine listen from me, and that seeing it from Brian's perspective was like how I came to fall in love with this album and appreciate it so much. Yeah, my only closing thought is that I do think it's like a very very interesting it's like one foot in the way that the Beach Boys sounded prior to 15 Big Ones and one foot in the way that they would sound basically for the rest of their career. Like
Yeah.
one foot in trying to be creative and groundbreaking, and one foot in trying to be nostalgic and make people just happy pop music.
Yeah.
And so it's a unique marriage of like those two different inspirations.
Yeah. And that's why I kind of described when I was talking about this album earlier, I kind of view it as like the turning point, for the band, where it's like they're transitioning. Like you can still hear like, a little bit of that old sound, but they're also moving into a new, a more nostalgia based sound. And leaning, like you said, leaning more into like the fun, poppier sounding songs and hits that made them big, so.
Yeah, and it's definitely like a we're still here and we're not going anywhere kind of album, I feel like,
Right.
because they had been off the charts for so many years.
Yeah.
So to come back swinging with multiple charting hits was like a letting the public and their competition of other bands know like, hey, we're still a force to be reckoned with. Yeah.
4 seasons, you better watch out.
Better believe it.
You better believe it. All right, so we can probably wrap it up there. So thank you everybody for listening to the 16th episode of Good Timin. I hope you all enjoyed the show. I had a great time discussing 15 big ones with you guys, and it was fun hearing everyone's thoughts and opinions on all the different tracks and outtakes. I know I'm definitely going to be giving the album another listen. Like in the coming days, I'm definitely going to listen to it some more, just because like you guys have kind of convinced me to re-listen to some of these tracks and like find new things to appreciate and enjoy. So, as always, if those of you listening like this podcast and want to hear more, feel free to subscribe or follow wherever you're listening. We greatly appreciate the support as it motivates us to make more episodes in the future. And then also as a reminder, the podcast is available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. So there's plenty of different places to listen and keep up with the show. So thank you again for listening, and we will see you all next time. Bye-bye.